Hey friends! Glad you're here at Peak Fanfiction. We've cooked up something special. What if Naruto was the primordial Kitsune god of DxD who made every devil king bow before him? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, The Weight of Waking the Earth split first. Not dramatically, not the way mountains shatter in old stories. It was subtle. A crack no wider than a finger, threading through the forest floor of Aokigahara like a vein finding its way to the surface. Then another. Then another. The trees closest to the epicenter didn't fall. They leaned away, as if some deep arboreal memory told them that what slept beneath their roots was stirring, and they wanted no part of it. 3,000 meters below the surface, in a hollow that existed on no geological survey and never would, something exhaled for the first time in 4,000 years. The breath was warm. It rose through rock and root and soil like heat from a furnace door cracked open, and when it reached the surface, every bird within 6 kilometers went silent simultaneously. Not fled, silent. As if sound itself had become inappropriate. Then the energy hit. It didn't explode outward. It unfolded. Layer after layer after layer, like a flower blooming in dimensions that light couldn't reach. It passed through the earth the way sunlight passes through glass, unstoppable, unconcerned, and utterly indifferent to whatever stood in its path. In the Vatican, every holy relic illuminated at once. Priests screamed. Cardinals clutched their hearts. The seraphs in heaven felt it in their bones and went very, very still. In Grigori headquarters, Azazel dropped the sacred gear prototype he'd been tinkering with. It shattered on the floor. He didn't notice. He was staring at the east wall as if he could see through it, across continents and oceans, to the source. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, very quietly, no. That's not possible. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have a word for what he was feeling. In the underworld, every alarm designed by Ajuka Beelzebub over the last 3 centuries activated simultaneously, then deactivated, then activated again in a stuttering panic that looked almost afraid. Ajuka himself was already at his monitoring station, his fingers frozen over controls that had become meaningless. The readings weren't off the charts. The charts had ceased to exist. His instruments were reporting values that shouldn't be expressible in mathematics as he understood them. And in the Lucifer estate, in a study lined with books older than most civilizations, Sirzechs Lucifer set down his teacup with a care that betrayed nothing of what he felt. The liquid inside was vibrating. The cup was vibrating. The air was vibrating. A frequency below sound, below feeling, something that resonated in the part of a devil's soul that remembered. What did it remember? Sirzechs closed his eyes. His power of destruction churned beneath his skin, restless, agitated, and for the first time in his long life, it felt small. Not weakened. Not suppressed. Just, correctly proportioned against something he had no framework for understanding. Graphia. She was already in the doorway. Of course she was. Her silver hair was slightly disheveled, the only sign he'd ever seen that she'd moved in genuine haste. You felt it, she said. Not a question. Everything felt it. Sirzechs opened his eyes. They were calm, but deep in the blue there was something that might have been wonder or might have been dread. Contact Seraphol. Contact Ajuka. Contact Falbium if he's awake. We need to meet. What do I tell them? Sirzechs was quiet for a moment. The vibration in the air was fading now, not diminishing, he realized, but settling. Like a giant that had shifted in its sleep and found a comfortable position. Except this giant was awake now. He could feel that too. The difference between a dormant pressure and a present one. Tell them, he said, that something old has woken up. Something older than the war. Older than my father. He paused. Possibly older than God. Graphia's expression didn't change. But her hand, resting against the doorframe, tightened until her knuckles went white. I'll prepare the summoning circle. No. Sirzechs stood, and his power rippled around him like a heat mirage. No summoning. No aggression. Nothing that could be interpreted as hostile. We go to it politely, or we wait for it to come to us. Those are our only options. And if it comes to us with hostile intent? Sirzechs looked at her, his queen, his wife, the woman who had stood beside him through wars that reshaped reality. He answered honestly. Then we pray it's merciful. Naruto opened his eyes to darkness, and the darkness was comfortable. Familiar. The earth around him was warm and close, like a blanket he'd wrapped himself in so long ago that he'd forgotten the act of lying down. He stretched, not physically, not yet. He stretched his awareness, letting it unfurl from the tight coil he'd compressed it into when he'd chosen to sleep. The world tasted different. Younger. Busier. More occupied than he remembered. There were energies everywhere, devil, angel, fallen, human, yokai, scattered across the planet like ants on a sugar pile. Some strong. None strong enough to matter. But there were so many now. Ha, he said to nobody. His voice was rusty. Unused muscles in his throat protested the vibration. Busy while I was out. He pressed his palm flat against the stone above him, granite, old but not as old as him, nothing was as old as him, and pushed. Not with physical strength. With presence. The stone didn't break. It moved. Reorganized itself. Made space. The earth above parted like a curtain, and Naruto rose through it the way a bubble rises through water, inevitably, without effort, without hurry. He emerged into moonlight and forest. Trees surrounded him, tall, dark, closely packed. Their bark was pale in the silver light, and the air smelled of loam and silence. He stood in a small clearing that hadn't existed 30 seconds ago, naked earth settling around his feet like it was apologizing for the inconvenience. Naruto rolled his shoulders. Cracked his neck. Looked down at himself. Same body. Same form he'd chosen last time, young, lean, human-shaped because humans were everywhere and it was easier to walk among them than explain what he actually was. Golden hair that fell messily to his jaw. Skin tanned warm. The whisker marks on his cheeks, 3 on each side, thin as brushstrokes, the only external hint of what lived beneath the surface. His clothes had rotted away sometime in the 1st century of sleep. That was fine. He held out his hand and pulled, not at anything physical, but at the ambient energy saturating this forest. It came eagerly, almost desperately, as if it had been waiting for someone worthy of shaping it. In seconds, he wore simple clothes, dark pants, a burnt orange jacket left open over a black shirt, sandals. Comfortable. Unremarkable. He took a breath. A real one, filling lungs that hadn't worked in millennia. The air was polluted, he muttered, wrinkling his nose. What are they burning? He started walking. No direction in mind, just forward. The trees leaned away as he passed, subtle, unconscious, the way flowers turn toward sunlight except in reverse. He let his senses spread lazily, mapping the world around him. A city to the south. Large. Human. A town to the east, smaller, quieter, and threaded through with devil energy. Young devil energy. Barely centuries old. Interesting. He walked for 20 minutes before he reached a road. Paved, some kind of black stone, smooth and continuous. He crouched, touched it. Asphalt. Clever. Humans had gotten clever while he slept. A metal box on wheels roared past him, lights blazing. He watched it go with open curiosity, then straightened and followed the road east. Toward the devil-touched town. Not because he cared about devils, they were young, their entire race was young compared to him, but because he remembered this area. He'd slept beneath it for a reason, long ago. Something about the convergence of ley lines, the way the Earth's energy pooled here like water in a basin. The devils had built on top of his bedroom. That was funny. He decided to find it funny rather than annoying. The town revealed itself in stages, first the scattered houses on the outskirts, then denser streets, then the glow of lights, so many lights, he'd never seen so many artificial lights in one place, and the sounds of life. Engines. Music. Voices. The hum of electricity in every wire overhead. Naruto walked down the main street of Kuoh Town at 2 in the morning, barefoot because his sandals had felt wrong on this smooth pavement, so he dissolved them back into energy, and he looked at everything with the quiet wonder of someone who'd seen civilizations rise and fall but had never seen this particular one before. A convenience store glowed on the corner. He peered through the window. Shelves of bright packages. A bored teenager behind a counter. A machine that appeared to be heating food. His stomach growled. "That's new," he said. He hadn't felt hunger in, when was the last time? Before he'd transcended the need for physical sustenance, certainly. But the body he wore remembered the desire for food even if the entity inside it didn't require it. And there was something that smelled. He followed his nose around the corner. Down a smaller street. Past closed shops and dark windows until he found it, a ramen stand. Closed, at this hour, but the residual smell of broth and noodles clung to the air like a ghost. Naruto stood in front of the shuttered stand and felt something ancient and quiet move through his chest. Not quite emotion. Deeper than that. A resonance with a version of himself so distant it was almost myth, a boy who'd eaten ramen alone at a stand like this and dreamed of being acknowledged. "I'll come back when you're open," he told the stand solemnly. He kept walking. The devil presence was stronger here, 2 sources, actually, on opposite sides of the town. Territorial markers. He could feel the boundaries drawn in energy, invisible to humans but obvious to anything with supernatural senses. 2 devil claims, side by side, carefully delineated. Young devils playing at lordship over a human settlement. He stopped on a bridge over a small river and leaned on the railing, looking down at black water reflecting city lights. The ley line convergence was directly below him, 200 meters down, a knot of natural energy so dense it could fuel a god for centuries. He'd slept curled around it like a fox around a warm stone. "They built a school on top of it," he murmured, sensing the structure to his northeast. The ley line's strongest point surfaced right beneath what his borrowed surface knowledge told him was an educational building. Kids. Literal children sitting on top of enough power to crack this island in half, and they don't even know. He chuckled. It was warm and genuine and it made the water below ripple without wind. Something pinged his awareness. Subtle. A transportation circle, devil magic, opening approximately 3 kilometers to his west. Someone arriving. Someone strong. Not strong by his standards, nothing was strong by his standards, but strong by the standards of this era. Strong enough to rule, probably. The energy signature was cold and precise, disciplined like a blade honed past necessity into art. Naruto didn't move from his spot on the bridge. He simply waited, watching the water, and let whoever was coming find him at their own pace. Sirzechs Lucifer had seen war. She'd fought in the Devil's Civil War, stood against the old Satan faction, killed beings that made grown devils weep with terror. She was the strongest queen, a title earned in blood and proven in centuries of service. Fear was something she understood intellectually but experienced rarely. She was afraid now. Not of what she would find, she'd accepted that mission the moment Sirzechs asked. Not of death, she'd made peace with that possibility long ago. She was afraid because as her transportation circle deposited her on a quiet street in Kuoh Town, the air itself felt heavy. Not oppressive. Not hostile. Just, full. Like standing at the base of a mountain and feeling its mass above you. Like treading water in an ocean and feeling the depth below. Something was here. Something so vast that her senses couldn't find its edges. She walked. Her maid uniform was impractical for reconnaissance, but she hadn't changed, hadn't thought to. Sirzechs' request had been immediate: go, find, observe. Report back. Do not engage hostilely. Do not provoke. Be polite. Be careful. The energy signature led her east through quiet streets. It wasn't hidden, that was the strange part. Whatever this entity was, it made no effort to conceal itself. It simply existed, openly, like a bonfire in a field of candles. How had they never detected it before? How long had it been here? She rounded a corner and saw the bridge. And the figure leaning on its railing. Her steps slowed. Then stopped. 20 meters away. He looked ordinary. That was the wrong word. He looked human. Young man, golden hair, casual clothes, barefoot on cold concrete. Lean build. Relaxed posture. He was watching the water below with the idle contentment of someone with nowhere to be. But Graphia's senses were screaming. What she saw and what she felt didn't match. Her eyes showed her a young man. Her power, her deep devil instincts, the ones that had kept her alive through a civil war, showed her something else entirely. Something with mass that shouldn't exist. Like looking at the surface of an ocean and knowing in your bones, that the trench beneath went down forever. He turned his head. Amber eyes. Slit pupils. Whisker marks on his cheeks, thin and deliberate looking. He smiled at her, easy, genuine, warm, and Graphia's breath caught because that warmth did nothing to diminish the pressure. If anything, it made it worse. A hostile entity she could fight. A friendly one this powerful, that she had no protocol for. You got here fast, he said. His voice was casual. Young-sounding. Conversational, like they were acquaintances meeting by chance. I figured I had at least until morning before anyone came looking. Graphia's training took over. She inclined her head, not a bow, not yet, but an acknowledgement of something. She wasn't sure what she was acknowledging. His existence, perhaps. I am Graphia Lucifuge. Queen to Sirzechs Lucifer, who leads the devils of the underworld. Lucifer. The man said the name like he was tasting it. That's a title now. Used to be just a name. One angel's name. He straightened from the railing and turned to face her fully, hands sliding into his pockets. Things really did change. You, Graphia stopped. Recalibrated. May I ask who you are? Naruto. He said it simply. No title. No family name. Just the word, like it should mean something. Then he tilted his head and seemed to reconsider. Though I doubt that name's been spoken by anyone in a very long time. Probably means nothing to you. It didn't. But the way the air shifted when he said it, the way the river below seemed to quiet, told her the name had weight regardless. You are the source of the energy disturbance detected globally approximately 2 hours ago, she said. Stating it. Not accusing. Probably. He shrugged. I woke up. Stretched a bit. Hard to do that quietly after sleeping as long as I did. How long? Give or take. He looked up at the sky, as if counting stars could help him count years. 4,000 years. Maybe a bit more. What year is it? Graphia told him. He whistled. Low and long. 4,200 years, then. New record for me. He looked back at her and that easy smile returned. So. Graphia. Queen to Sirzechs Lucifer. You're here to figure out if I'm a threat. There was no point in denying it. Yes. Smart. You're Lucifer's smart to send someone strong but not himself. Shows respect without showing fear. Good politics. He nodded approvingly. Tell him I'm not a threat. Not to him, not to his people. I just woke up and I'm stretching my legs. That's all. With respect, Graphia said carefully, an entity of your apparent power appearing without warning within devil-claimed territory. Devil-claimed? Naruto looked around with theatrical surprise. This town? Really? He laughed. I slept under this spot for 4 millennia. If anyone's territory it is, it's mine. But I don't care about territory. Never did. Too much hassle. Graphia processed this. An entity that had been dormant beneath Kuoh Town, beneath Rias Gremari's territory, for over 4,000 years. Since before the Great War. Since before the current devil government. Since before, what are you? The question came out before she could filter it through diplomacy. Naruto looked at her. Really looked. Those amber eyes caught moonlight in a way that wasn't quite right, reflecting it back with a faint internal luminescence. The whisker marks on his cheeks seemed to deepen for a moment. The air grew heavier. I'm a fox, he said. And grinned. 9 phantom shapes flickered behind him, there and gone, too fast to see clearly, but the impression of them burned into Graphia's retinas. Tails. 9 of them. Not fox-sized. Not building-sized. Horizon-sized. Graphia's knees wanted to bend. Every instinct she had, devil, warrior, servant, demanded she kneel. Not in submission to an enemy. In recognition of something fundamental. Something that preceded her. Preceded her race. The feeling was biological, chemical, deeper than thought. Like gravity. She didn't kneel. But it cost her. It cost her more than any battle ever had. Naruto noticed. His expression softened, not with pity, but with something that might have been respect. You've got a spine, he said. I like that. Your Lucifer chose well. He turned back to the railing, the pressure easing as his attention shifted. The air became breathable again. Tell him what you felt. Tell him what you saw. And tell him this, if he wants to talk, I'll be around. I found a ramen stand I want to try when it opens. I'll be easy to find. Graphia stood in silence for 3 full seconds, reassembling her composure. Then, he will want to meet you. Likely soon. The other Satan class, kings, Naruto said. You call them kings now? Satans. The 4 devil kings. 4. He seemed amused by this. I remember when devils only had 1 king. Didn't end well for him. He waved a hand without turning around. Sure. They can come talk to me. Or I'll come to them, if they'd rather do it on their own ground. I'm not picky. You would come to the underworld? Why not? I'm curious. He glanced over his shoulder. I've never been to the underworld. Didn't exist when I went to sleep, or if it did, nobody had built anything interesting there yet. Might be fun to see what you've done with the place. This, more actions write the next chapter now. Chapter 2, Thrones of Ash. 3 days passed. 3 days in which Naruto ate ramen twice daily, discovered something called convenience store on Ijairai, and decided it was acceptable, found a public bathhouse and soaked for 4 hours while the owner wondered why the water temperature kept rising on its own, and generally behaved like a tourist with infinite time and 0 obligations. 3 days in which the supernatural world collectively lost its mind. He was aware of it, of course. He could feel the frantic energy signatures pulsing back and forth across dimensions, messages, summons, emergency councils. Heaven had convened its seraphs twice. Grigori had gone to full alert status. The yokai factions in Kyoto had sent scouts toward Kuoh that turned back the moment they felt the edge of his presence. Even the Norse and Greek pantheons had rippled with unease, distant gods shifting uncomfortably on their thrones as something in their divine instincts whispered that the pecking order had changed. Naruto found it all mildly entertaining. Like watching ants discover a new object in their path, the frantic communication, the circling, the tentative approach and retreat. On the morning of the fourth day, he was sitting on his rooftop watching the sunrise when Graphia appeared. No transportation circle this time. She simply walked, up the external staircase of the apartment building, in her maid uniform, at 6 in the morning, carrying a wrapped bento box. He heard her coming from the third floor and had already turned to face the stairwell door when she emerged. "Breakfast delivery," he said. "Sirzechs asked me to bring this." She set the bento down beside him. "He also wishes to extend a second invitation. More formal than the first." Naruto opened the bento. Inside, rice, grilled salmon, pickled vegetables, miso soup in a sealed container, and, he grinned, a small cup of ramen broth with noodles packed separately. "Your husband pays attention." "He does." Graphia remained standing, hands clasped in front of her. "The invitation is to a full assembly. Not merely the 4 Satans, the heads of the remaining pillar families, the military leadership, and representatives of the Elder Council. They wish to formally acknowledge your presence." Naruto separated his chopsticks and began eating. "Acknowledge my presence," he repeated between bites. "That sounds like politics." "It is politics." "Is it necessary politics, or is it vanity politics?" Graphia considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Necessary. The devil population is aware that something occurred. Rumors are spreading, some accurate, most not. Without a formal acknowledgement, fear will breed in the absence of information. Sirzechs believes that a controlled introduction will prevent panic. So you want to parade me in front of your ruling class so they stop imagining I'm worse than I am." "Essentially, yes." Naruto ate a piece of salmon. Chewed thoughtfully. "Am I worse than they're imagining? I genuinely don't know." Graphia said it without inflection. "I suspect most of them cannot imagine what you actually are. The gap between their fear and reality is likely, significant. In both directions." He laughed. "Honest. I keep telling you, I like that." He finished the salmon and started on the rice. "Fine. I'll come to your assembly." "When?" "This afternoon. 3 hours from now." 3 hours. He looked down at his clothes, the same materialized outfit he'd been wearing for 3 days. It didn't get dirty, didn't wear, didn't wrinkle, perks of being made from pure energy, but it was casual. "Should I dress up?" Something that might have been amusement flickered across Graphia's face. "That is entirely your prerogative." "Helpful." He grinned at her. "I'll figure something out." 3 hours, same pickup spot as last time. "I'll come for you here." "Deal." He held up the bento container. "Tell your husband the food was good. And tell him," he paused, something shifting in his tone. Lighter to serious in the space of a breath. "Tell him I appreciate the thought behind it. The gesture. It's been a long time since anyone brought me breakfast." Graphia inclined her head. "I will tell him." She left the way she'd come, down the stairs, silent, precise. Naruto watched her go and then turned back to his bento, eating slowly, watching the sun paint Kuoh Town in shades of gold and amber. An assembly. A formal acknowledgement. The ruling class of devilkind gathered in one room to meet him. He wondered if any of them would be as interesting as the 4 Satans had been. Probably not. Leaders were usually the best a society had to offer. But you never knew. He finished his breakfast, set the empty bento aside, and closed his eyes. Let his awareness drift downward, through the rooftop, through the building, through the earth beneath it, all the way down to the ley line convergence far below. It pulsed gently against his consciousness like a cat brushing against its owner's leg. Familiar. Welcoming. "I'm going out again today," he told it. "Watch the place for me." The ley line pulsed once. Not sentient, Not exactly, but responsive to his will in the way all natural energy was responsive to the thing that had shaped it. Naruto stood, stretched, and decided to take a walk before his pickup. He found Rias by accident. Or rather, he found a fight by accident, and Rias happened to be in the middle of it. The park at the center of Kuoh had a wooded section that bordered the school grounds. Naruto had been walking through it, enjoying the bird sounds and the way morning light filtered through maple leaves, when he heard the distinctive crack of magical energy discharging. Not devil energy. Something else. Wild. Chaotic. A stray, one of those rogue supernatural beings that drifted into claimed territories without permission. He emerged from the tree line to find Rias Gremory and two of her peerage members engaged with what appeared to be a minotaur. Which was, unexpected, in modern Japan, but then again, the supernatural world had always had a pest problem. The beast was large, 3 meters tall, muscled like a freight train, horns curved and sharp. It had already torn several trees from the ground and was currently swinging one like a club at a blond boy who dodged with more enthusiasm than technique. Rias stood 30 meters back, power of destruction coiling around her hands in crimson-black spirals. Beside her, a small white-haired girl was already moving, fast, inhumanly fast, flanking the minotaur with what appeared to be gauntlets manifested from a sacred gear. Naruto leaned against a tree and watched. The blond boy, Kiba, his borrowed knowledge supplied, a night piece, darted in with a sword construct that scored a line across the minotaur's flank. The beast roared. The white-haired girl, Kaneko, a rook, hit it from behind with a punch that would have cratered concrete. The minotaur staggered. Then Rias fired. Her power of destruction crossed the distance in a heartbeat, a sphere of annihilation that struck the minotaur's shoulder and simply erased a portion of it. The beast screamed. Thrashed. Its remaining arm swung wildly. And caught Kaneko across the ribs. The small girl flew backward, 10 meters, 15, crashing through a sapling and hitting the ground hard. She didn't get up immediately. The minotaur, maddened by pain, turned toward her fallen form. Naruto didn't move from his tree. He wanted to see what happened next. Rias moved. Fast, faster than she'd been moving before. She put herself between the minotaur and her fallen rook, both hands blazing with destruction, and fired again. This time the sphere was larger. It took the beast in the chest and ate through half its torso. The minotaur collapsed, dissolving into particles before it hit the ground. Rias was at Kaneko's side instantly. "Are you okay?" "Let me see." "Fine." The small girl's voice was flat. She sat up, one arm pressed against her ribs. "Bruised. Not broken." "That was reckless. It was already dying, you didn't need to stay that close, I had the angle. You had a concussion waiting to happen." Kiba jogged over, sword dissolving. "All clear. No others in the area." He paused. Tilted his head. Actually, all three of them felt it at the same time. Turned. Looked at the tree line. Naruto waved. The reaction was immediate and varied. Kiba's hand went to his side where his sword had been. Kaneko went still, utterly, completely still, the way a prey animal goes still. Rias straightened. Squared her shoulders. Met his eyes. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Since about 30 seconds after it started." He pushed off the tree and walked toward them. The grass didn't bend under his feet. Neither Kiba nor Kaneko seemed to notice, but Rias did, her eyes flicked down and back up. "Nice work. Clean kill. Could have been faster, but clean." Could have been. Rias stopped herself. Took a breath. "Are you critiquing my combat performance?" "Observation, not critique. You've got good instincts. Your team works well together. The knight's fast but overextends, he commits to strikes before confirming his exit path." Kiba blinked. The rook strong but doesn't respect her own durability limits. Gets hit because she assumes she can take it. Kaniko's flat expression somehow flattened further. And you, he looked at Rias. You wait too long to commit your power. You've got devastating output but you hold back, aim for precision when overwhelming force would end things faster. Silence. You watched my rook get hit, Rias said slowly, and didn't intervene. She's not dead. Not even broken. And you handled it. He stopped a few meters from them. I'm not a safety net, Rias Gremory. I'm not anyone's guardian angel. You have power, use it. Rely on it. Don't wait for someone stronger to solve your problems. Something flickered in her expression, not anger, exactly. Evaluation. She was measuring him, he realized. Not his power, she couldn't measure that, but his character. Who he was. What he cared about. That's a cold philosophy, she said. No. It's a respectful one. He smiled, and it was genuine. I could have erased that minotaur from existence before it even entered this town. Killed it before it knew it was dead. But then what would you have learned? What would your people have gained? He shrugged. You're young. You need to fight. Need to grow. Need to earn your strength rather than having it handed to you. I respect that process. And if Kaniko had been seriously hurt? Naruto looked at the small girl. She looked back at him with golden eyes that held no expression and infinite wariness. Then I would have fixed it, he said simply. I was here. I was watching. No one was going to die. But between safe and unchallenged, there's a lot of space where growth happens. I left you in that space. Rias stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she nodded. I don't agree with your approach. But I understand the logic. That's fair. Will you be in town today? My brother mentioned, assembly this afternoon. Yeah. I'm going. He glanced at the dissolving remains of the Minotaur. Your territory's got a pest problem, by the way. That thing didn't wander in by accident. Something drove it here. Might want to check your barrier wards. Rias frowned. I checked them last week. Check them again. Something's changed. He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. He'd felt it, subtle, almost undetectable, but his senses were not almost anything. The barrier around Kuoh had been tampered with. Small holes, carefully made. Letting things through that shouldn't get through. Someone was testing the defenses. Probing. Not his problem. Not yet. I'll see you around, he said, and walked away through the trees before they could respond. Behind him, Kiba let out a shaky breath. That was him. The one everyone's talking about. That was him, Rias confirmed. Kiba searched for the word. Terrifying. But also, yeah, Rias said. I know. She looked at where Naruto had disappeared into the tree line. Come on. Let's get Kaniko to Asia for healing. And then I need to check the barrier wards. The Underworld's governmental district occupied the heart of Lilith, a sprawling complex of buildings that combined fortress architecture with political grandeur. The Hall of Assembly was its centerpiece, a domed chamber large enough to seat 300, with tiered galleries rising around a central floor like a Roman amphitheater designed by someone with unlimited budget and a flair for intimidation. Today, it held approximately 150 of the most powerful devils in existence. The Pillar family heads occupied the first tier, those ancient bloodlines that had survived the civil war and maintained their status under the new Satan regime. Gremory. Citri. Phoenix. Agars. Glaciolabulas. Baal. Each house represented by its lord or lady, each radiating the particular brand of aristocratic composure that came from centuries of political survival. The second tier held military commanders, territorial governors, and advisors. The Elder Council, those few devils old enough to remember the Great War firsthand, occupied a separate section, their energy signatures ancient and heavy. The four Satans sat on the central floor. Not elevated. Not throned. For chairs in a loose semicircle, facing the main entrance. Sirzechs had been specific about the arrangement: no power displays, no intimidation, nothing that could be interpreted as a challenge. The room buzzed with conversation. Tension. Curiosity. Fear, buried under decorum. Every devil present had felt something 4 days ago, a pressure, a weight, a cosmic shift. They'd received minimal information since an ancient being had awakened, the Satans had made contact, a formal introduction was imminent. Rumors had filled the gaps. Some said it was a god. Some said it was a dragon, another great red, perhaps. Some whispered about Trihexa, the beast of revelation, stirring from its seal. A few, the very old ones, those with access to the oldest texts, said nothing at all, and their silence was more frightening than any rumor. Lord Baal, Zekrom Baal, the Elder, the political manipulator who had shaped devil society from behind the scenes for millennia, sat in his seat with perfect stillness and watched the entrance. His eyes held the specific quality of someone who suspected he knew what was coming and wished he didn't. The doors were massive. Carved darkwood, reinforced with demonic steel, inscribed with protective wards layered by every Beelzebub for the last 600 years. They were designed to be imposing. To remind anyone entering that they walked into the seat of devil power. They opened. Graphia entered first. Her role was herald, traditional, formal, expected. She walked to the center of the floor with measured steps and turned to face the assembly. Lords and ladies of the underworld. Satan class. Honored elders. Her voice carried perfectly, cold, clear, precise. I present a guest who comes at the invitation of all four Satans, extended in good faith and received in kind. She paused. The room was utterly silent. He has identified himself as the Primordial Kitsune. The first fox. An entity predating our recorded history. Murmurs. Quickly suppressed. He comes with no hostility, no demands, and no obligation. He comes as a guest, and we receive him as such. Graphia stepped aside. Naruto. Just the one name. No title. He'd been specific about that. He walked in. He'd changed his clothes, not dramatically, but enough to show awareness of the occasion. Dark pants, well-fitted. A burnt orange haori over a black high-collared shirt, the fabric seemingly simple but catching light in ways that suggested it wasn't quite material. His feet were bare on the polished stone floor. His golden hair was pushed back from his face, and his whisker marks were clearly visible, and his eyes were amber fire. The effect on the room was immediate and visceral. Every devil present felt him. Not as a power reading, not as an energy signature to be catalogued and compared, as a weight. A fundamental shift in the room's reality. The air grew denser. Sounds grew muffled. The temperature didn't change but something thermal shifted, a warmth that wasn't heat, a pressure that wasn't physical. Several of the younger pillar lords gripped their armrests. 2 of the military commanders stood involuntarily, not to challenge, but because their bodies demanded movement in response to what their instincts were screaming. The Elder Council went rigid. One of them, the oldest, a devil who had fought in the Great War and survived, made a sound. Small. Quiet. A whimper he couldn't suppress, because his ancient body remembered this feeling. Not from experience. From genetics. From the deep racial memory encoded in devil DNA from before the biblical God gave them their current form. Naruto walked to the center of the floor. Unhurried. Easy. Bare feet silent on stone. He looked around the amphitheater with open, genuine interest, taking in the faces, the architecture, the pageantry of it. Then he smiled. Nice room, he said. Good acoustics. Somebody designed this with real intent. The sheer normalcy of the comment cracked something in the room's tension. A few nervous laughs, quickly stifled. Sirzechs, from his chair, allowed himself a small smile. Thank you for accepting our invitation, Sirzechs said. His voice was steady, the voice of a king who had decided he would not show fear even if he felt it. We've gathered the leadership of Devilkind to meet you openly, in the interest of transparency and mutual respect. Naruto nodded. Appreciated. I know my waking up caused some alarm. Sorry about that, hard to be subtle about existing after that long a sleep. He turned slowly, addressing the room at large. So. I'm Naruto. I'm very old. I'm very powerful. And I'm not here to hurt anyone. He spread his hands. Questions. The silence that followed was the silence of 150 people who had questions but were terrified of asking them. Zekrom Bale broke it. How powerful. The old devil's voice was steady. Controlled. But his eyes burned with that peculiar mixture of political calculation and primal fear. You say very powerful. That means different things to different beings. Can you be specific? Naruto turned to look at him. Really looked, not just at the physical form but at the whole of him. The age. The ambition. The centuries of manipulation and control. You want a measurement, Naruto said. A scale you can put me on so you know where I fit in your hierarchy. I want information, Zekrom corrected. Knowledge is how we assess threat and opportunity. Fair. Naruto considered for a moment. Okay. Here's a measurement for you. He looked at Sirzechs. Your strongest Satan. Sirzechs Lucifer. The super devil. Can unravel matter at a fundamental level with his power of destruction. One of the strongest beings in this world's current era. Sirzechs met his gaze evenly. He's, and I say this with genuine respect, because he's impressive for his age, a rounding error compared to me. Naruto said it without arrogance. Without malice. The way a mountain might describe its relationship to a pebble, if mountains could talk. Not an insult. A mathematical reality. The gap between us is not something that can be bridged with training or power-ups or sacred gears or any other mechanism this world has produced. It's a categorical difference. Like comparing the depth of a puddle to the depth of an ocean. Dead silence. That's, someone in the second tier started. Provable, Naruto said, cutting them off gently. If anyone would like a demonstration. I don't mind. What kind of demonstration? Ajuka asked. His voice was careful. Scientific. The question of a researcher, not a warrior. Whatever you like. I'll suppress my energy to 1% of 1% of my full capacity. Anyone here can try to damage me, move me, or affect me in any way. Or, he tilted his head, I can show you something. A fraction of what I actually am. Controlled. Safe. Just so you understand. The room held its breath. Show us, Falbium said from his chair. Everyone looked at him, he'd been so quiet they'd almost forgotten he was present. He shrugged. We're all thinking it. Better to know than to imagine. Naruto looked at Sirzechs. A question in his eyes. Sirzechs hesitated for only a moment. Then nodded. Controlled. Safe. At your discretion. Controlled and safe, Naruto confirmed. Nobody moves. Nobody does anything. Just watch. He closed his eyes. And let go. Not all of it. Not even close to all of it. He released the compression on his energy the way one might crack a window in a sealed room, just a sliver. A fraction. The barest loosening of the container he kept himself in. The effect was absolute. The air in the hall of assembly solidified. Not literally, no one suffocated, but it became heavy enough that breathing required conscious effort. The stone floor cracked. Not from force, from significance. The physical world straining under the metaphysical weight of what Naruto was. Behind him, visible to every eye in the room, they manifested. 9 tails. Not physical, not fur and bone. They were made of energy, golden amber fire that burned without heat, each one vast enough to fill the hall on its own. 9 of them, spread behind him like the rays of a dark sun, and each one pulsed with more raw power than any single being in the room possessed in totality. His eyes opened. They were not amber anymore. They were gold, solid, luminous gold, with pupils that were vertical slits of absolute darkness. The whisker marks on his face had deepened, become grooves that held faint light within them. And the feeling of it, every devil in the room felt their knees buckle. Not metaphorically. Physically. Their bodies, down to the cellular level, recognized what they were in the presence of and responded with the only appropriate reaction, submission. Not to a king. Not to a conqueror. To the fundamental architecture of reality itself. To something that had existed before them, that had allowed them to exist, that could revoke that permission with the ease of breathing. Several of the Pillar Lords went to their knees. Not voluntarily, their bodies simply did it, dropping them before conscious thought could intervene. Military commanders gripped the railings of their tier to stay upright, arms trembling. The Elder Council, ancient, proud, survivors of wars that ended civilizations, bowed their heads as one, because the alternative was to break. On the central floor, Seraphal's hands were white-knuckled on her chair's armrests. Ajuka had gone pale, sheet-white, and his eyes were wide with something beyond fear. It was comprehension. He understood what he was looking at, on a technical level, and the understanding was worse than ignorance. Falbium had closed his eyes entirely, not in dismissal, but in self-preservation. Sirzechs was standing. He'd risen from his chair at some point during the display, and he stood now facing Naruto with his power of destruction rippling around him involuntarily, not aggressive, not attacking. Reacting. The way iron filings react to a magnet. His power knew what it was facing, even if his mind hadn't fully processed it. His knees trembled. His jaw was tight. Sweat beaded at his temples, a biological response he couldn't control, hadn't experienced since he was a child facing his father's wrath for the first time. But he was standing. Naruto noticed. Looked at him. And something like warmth entered those terrible golden eyes. Then he pulled it back. Recompressed. The tails faded. The gold receded to amber. The weight lifted. The air returned to normal, or what now felt like normal, though every person in the room would spend the rest of their lives remembering what real pressure felt like. Naruto exhaled softly. Rolled his shoulders. Looked around the room at 150 shattered expressions. That, he said conversationally, was approximately 0.3%. Give or take. Nobody spoke. Nobody could speak. Naruto waited. Patient. He'd done this before, not here, not to these people, but to others, in other ages. The moment after revelation, when minds struggled to rebuild themselves around a new understanding of reality. It took time. He gave them time. Sirzechs was the first to recover. Of course he was the strongest, the most composed, the one whose identity was built on being the immovable center. He took a breath. Then another. Then he stepped forward, into the open space between his chair and where Naruto stood. I believe, he said, and his voice only wavered slightly, that the assembly now understands the situation. Murmured assent. Shaky. Scattered. Sirzechs looked at Naruto. Looked at him fully, openly, without pretense or politics. One being acknowledging another, across a gap that made all other gaps meaningless. And then Sirzechs Lucifer, the most powerful devil alive, the super devil, the man who had never bent to any force in his existence, bowed. Not deeply. Not submissively. But genuinely. A bow of recognition. Of respect. Of acknowledgement that the being before him occupied a place in reality that was beyond competition, beyond challenge, beyond the very concept of opposition. "We recognize you," Sirzechs said, still bowed. "Not as our ruler. Not as our enemy. As something greater than our frameworks can contain. And we offer you our respect freely, because it is due." One by one, the other Satans followed. Seraphol, rising to her feet and bowing with a grace that cost her visible effort. Ajuka, bowing sharply, precisely, the way a scientist acknowledges an axiom. Falbium, who didn't stand but inclined his entire upper body forward with a depth that conveyed more than many full bows. And then, like dominoes falling, the room. The Pillar Lords. The Commanders. The Elders. One by one and then all at once, every devil in the Hall of Assembly bowed their heads to the Primordial Kitsune. Not in defeat. Not in servitude. In truth. In the acknowledgement of a reality that had always existed but was now, finally, impossible to deny. Naruto stood in the center of it and felt lonely. For just a moment. A flash of something ancient and tired that crossed his features too quickly for anyone looking at the floor to catch. The loneliness of being what he was, of being so far above that even genuine respect felt like distance. Like isolation. Like being worshipped when all he wanted was to be understood. Then it passed. He smiled. Warm, genuine, reaching his eyes. "Thank you," he said. And meant it. "Now stand up. All of you. I didn't come here to collect bows, I came here to meet interesting people. And you can't be interesting while staring at the floor." A few uncertain laughs. People straightening. Composure being rebuilt. Sirzechs rose from his bow and there was something new in his eyes, not fear, not awe, but relief. They'd offered respect and it had been accepted gracefully. The worst-case scenarios that had haunted his nights evaporated. "Perhaps," Sirzechs said, "we could continue this in a less formal setting. I believe the upper terrace has been prepared with refreshments. Food?" Naruto's expression brightened visibly. "Absolutely. Lead the way." The upper terrace was a masterpiece of understated luxury, open air above the governmental district, looking out over the city, with tables laden with food and drink. The late afternoon light of the underworld's artificial sky cast everything in warm purple gold. The full assembly hadn't followed them up, just the Satans, a handful of the Pillar Lords who'd been specifically invited to the smaller gathering, Graphia, and the Elder Council representative Zekrom Bale, who'd insisted on attending with the look of a man who would not be denied. Naruto stood at the railing, a plate of food in one hand, looking out over Lilith. The city sprawled below in geometric beauty, and he studied it with genuine appreciation. Seraphol appeared beside him. She'd dropped the magical girl persona entirely, no twin tails, no cutesy speech patterns. The woman who stood beside him was sharp-eyed and politically astute and not remotely interested in hiding it. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Go for it. Are you lonely?" Naruto glanced at her. Surprised. Not by the question, by who was asking it. He'd expected the scientists and politicians to approach him first. Not the empath hiding inside a diplomat. "Why do you ask?" "Because when everyone bowed, you looked sad." She said it plainly. "Just for a second. But I wasn't looking at the floor." Naruto ate a piece of something that tasted like seasoned meat. Chewed. Thought about lying. Decided against it. "Sometimes," he said. "It's hard not to be, when you're the only one of something. There are other primordials. Ophis. Great Red. Trihexa. Ophis wants silence. Great Red wants his gap. Trihexa wants destruction. None of them want conversation. He looked at her sideways. We're not a social species, us old things. Most of us went mad or went quiet eons ago. But not you. Not me. He smiled. I like people. Always have. It's my great weakness, apparently. I keep waking up because I get curious about what you're all doing without me. Seraphol was quiet for a moment. Then, if you want, and this is a genuine offer, not a political one, I know this city very well. Better than anyone except maybe Ajuka. I could show you around. The parts that aren't in the tourist brochures. Naruto looked at her. Really looked. Saw the offer for what it was, partly political, yes, everything she did was partly political, but also partly real. An outstretched hand from someone who recognized loneliness because she wore her own mask for her own reasons. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. She smiled, not her stage smile, not her camera smile. A small, real one. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. From across the terrace, Ajuka approached with the barely contained energy of a man who'd been restraining himself for hours. If I could, I have questions. Many questions. About your energy signature, the mechanism of your, Ajuka. Sirzechs appeared behind his fellow Satan with a hand on his shoulder. Perhaps not all at once. Let him ask, Naruto said, turning from the railing. I don't mind. What do you want to know? Ajuka's composure broke slightly, eagerness bleeding through. Your energy output. During the demonstration. My instruments measured, or tried to measure, the ambient radiation. The values were, he paused, frustration clear, I don't have words. My mathematics broke. Literally. The equations I've used to describe supernatural energy for 600 years returned undefined values. That's because your mathematics are built on axioms that don't apply to me, Naruto said. He said it the way a teacher says something to a student, not condescending, but aware of the knowledge gap. Your system assumes that energy exists within a bounded framework. That there are limits, high limits, maybe, but limits. I exist outside that framework. I'm not more energy on your scale. I'm a different scale entirely. Ajuka absorbed this. His green eyes were intense. A different scale. You mean, I mean that the energy system this world operates on, demonic power, holy power, natural energy, is like a river. It flows within banks. Even at its most extreme, super devils, seraphs, dragon gods, it's still river. Just a very big, very powerful river. He met Ajuka's eyes. I'm the ocean that river flows into. We're made of the same substance, but the comparison is categorical, not quantitative. Ajuka was very still. Behind his glasses, his eyes moved rapidly, processing, modeling, restructuring. That's why our wards recognize you. They're made of the same, fundamental substance. At the deepest level, all supernatural energy in this world is, downstream of me. Yes. By God, Ajuka whispered. Then caught himself. Apologies. That's an extraordinary claim. It's an extraordinary truth. Naruto shrugged. But don't take my word for it. You're smart enough to verify it yourself, if you build new mathematics. Ajuka looked like a man who'd just been told the universe was larger than he thought and was trying to decide whether to be terrified or ecstatic. He settled on both. I need to go to my laboratory, he said abruptly. Immediately. I need paper. Lots of paper. He turned and walked away without another word. Sirzechs watched him go with fond resignation. You've just given him the most exciting puzzle of his life, Sirzechs said. He won't sleep for a week. Good. Naruto grinned. Smart people should have puzzles. Keeps them out of trouble. Sirzechs stepped up to the railing where Seraphol had been, the Leviathan having drifted to refill her drink. For a moment, both of them looked out over the city in silence. I need to ask you something, Sirzechs said. As one leader to, he paused. As someone responsible for millions of lives to someone who could end those lives without effort. Ask. Will you interfere in our politics? Our governance? Our internal affairs? Naruto was quiet for a moment. No. Even if you disagree with our choices? Even then. You've built something here, Sirzechs. Something real. It's imperfect, I can see that. Your class system is unjust, your treatment of reincarnated devils is problematic, your rating games turn warfare into entertainment. I could list a dozen things I'd change if I were in your position. He looked at the Devil King. But I'm not. And it's not my place. You built this. You fix it. Or don't, it's your civilization. And the line? Where does your non-interference end? Naruto's eyes went flat. Just for a moment, a flash of something cold behind the warmth. Genocide. Enslavement of the unwilling. The deliberate destruction of the innocent for sport. His voice was the same casual tone, but the words carried weight that bent the air. If I see those things, truly see them, not political maneuvering, not the messy compromises of governance, but genuine atrocity, I will end them. And whoever is responsible. That's clear. I try to be. The warmth returned to his eyes. But those are extreme cases. For everything else, your territory, your rules. I'm just visiting. Sirzechs nodded slowly. And the other factions? If they approach you, I'll be polite to anyone who's polite to me. I'm not looking to play one side against another. I don't need allies, Sirzechs. I don't need protection or resources or political support. I need, he laughed softly at himself, ramen and interesting conversations and maybe a comfortable place to sleep that isn't a rooftop. We can provide those things. I know. I appreciate it. But I don't want to be owned. Not even by well-meaning kings. He held up a hand before Sirzechs could protest. I know that's not what you're doing. But others will see it that way. If I stay too long in devil territory, the angels will panic. If I visit heaven, you'll worry. If I talk to Azazel, you know about Azazel? I know about everyone. I've been awake for 4 days and I've already mapped the political landscape. He smiled. I told you. Information osmosis. I'm very good at it. Sirzechs let out a breath. You're remarkably easy to talk to. For an entity that made my entire ruling class bow involuntarily. I've had a lot of practice talking to people. Millennia of practice. Naruto turned from the railing. But I'll tell you something honestly, Sirzechs. Something I haven't told the others. The Devil King straightened. Attentive. I like what you've built here. Not just the city, the system. The peace you've maintained. The way you handled the civil war, overthrowing the old guard without destroying your civilization in the process. The way you lead. He met Sirzechs' eyes. You're a good king. Young and imperfect, but good. And if things ever get bad enough that you genuinely need help, not political maneuvering, not power plays, but a genuine existential threat to your people, he left the sentence unfinished. But the implication hung in the air like a promise. Sirzechs swallowed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Hopefully you'll never need to cash that check. Naruto clapped him on the shoulder, the casual gesture of a friend rather than a god, and walked toward the food table. Now. I saw something over there that smelled incredible and I'm going to eat approximately all of it. The afternoon wore on. Naruto ate freely, spoke with several pillar lords who approached him with varying degrees of courage, and generally behaved with the easy charm of someone at a party they hadn't expected to enjoy. He complimented Lord Phoenix's wife on her fire magic, smooth control, took me centuries to manage flames that elegantly. He asked Lady Agars about her territory and listened with genuine interest to her description of its geography. He made Falbium laugh, actually laugh, with a joke about sleeping habits that only someone who'd napped for 4,000 years could tell. But beneath the socializing, his awareness moved constantly. Cataloging. Assessing. Not threats, people. Who was genuine? Who was performing? Who looked at him with honest curiosity and who looked at him with calculation? Zekrom Bale was calculation incarnate. The old devil watched him from across the terrace like a chess player studying a new piece on the board, one whose movement rules he hadn't yet figured out. Naruto felt the weight of that gaze and acknowledged it with a raised glass and a smile that communicated, "I see you seeing me." Zekrom raised his glass in return. A salute between intelligences. Neither friendly nor hostile. Acknowledging. As the evening began to darken the artificial sky, Naruto found himself in conversation with an unexpected companion. One of the elder council members, a devil so old his physical form had begun to thin, as if centuries of existence were wearing away at his solidity, approached him with the careful movements of someone whose body was frilier than their mind. "I remember," the elder said without preamble, settling into a chair near Naruto's railing position. Naruto looked at him. "Remember what?" "The feeling." The old devil's voice was papery. Thin. But his eyes, deep red, ancient, were sharp. "Not from this life. From before. From the blood memory. Every devil carries it, so deep most never access it. But I'm old enough to have touched those depths." He looked at Naruto with an expression that was neither afraid nor submissive. "Just, knowing. You were there. At the beginning." "Before the beginning," Naruto corrected gently. "But yes. The original Lucifer knew. The true Lucifer, not the title, the being. He knew something slept beneath the world. Something that had been there before God shaped it into what it became." The elder's hands were steady in his lap. "He was afraid of you. He was smart to be. But you never intervened. In the war. In anything. You slept through all of it." "I did." "Why?" Naruto was quiet for a long moment. The noise of the gathering continued around them, conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses, but their corner had become an island of stillness. "Because it wasn't my war," he said finally. "None of it was. God made his system. Lucifer rebelled. Angels fell. Devils rose. It was your story, all of you. Your tragedy and your triumph. Who was I to interfere? You could have prevented it. The Great War. Millions dead. Civilizations destroyed. Yes. No denial. No justification. Just acknowledgement. I could have. I chose not to. Do you regret that?" Naruto looked at the old devil. Looked through him, past him, to something very far away and very long ago. "Every day," he said softly. "But I'd make the same choice again. Because a world shaped by my hand isn't your world. It's just, mine. And you deserve to be yours." The elder stared at him. Something shifted in those ancient red eyes, a reassessment. A recategorization. Not threat, not ally, not ruler, not God, witness. The primordial Kitsune was a witness. Something that watched. That remembered. That cared, in its way, but would not overwrite the stories of others with its own overwhelming narrative. "You're kinder than I expected," the elder said. "I'm older than you expected," Naruto replied. "Kindness is what you learn when cruelty gets boring." The elder nodded slowly. Rose from his chair with the careful deliberation of great age. "For what it's worth, from someone old enough to understand what the words mean, welcome back. The world is more interesting with you in it." He walked away. Naruto watched him go and felt something warm in his chest that had nothing to do with the food or the drink. Welcome back. When was the last time someone had been glad he existed? He returned to Kuoh Town that evening via Graphia's transportation circle. She deposited him at the park, his request, and stood for a moment in the fading light as if wanting to say something. Out with it, Naruto said. The assembly went well. Better than Sirzechs-sama hoped. I know. I was there. I mean, she hesitated. Sirzechs Lucifer, who never hesitated. You were kind to them. You didn't need to be. You could have demanded anything, tribute, territory, servitude, and after that demonstration, they would have given it. But you didn't. Would you have respected me if I had? No. Then there's your answer. He smiled at her. Good night, Grafia. Tell your husband the food was good. Again. She bowed, deeper than protocol required, and vanished in a flash of silver. Naruto stood alone in the darkening park. Streetlights were flickering on around him. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A mother called her child inside. The sounds of ordinary life, human life, washed over him like warm water. He walked toward his rooftop. But halfway there, he stopped. That presence again. The one he'd felt days ago, distant, angry, fallen angel energy doing something wrong. It was closer now. Not here, not in Kuoh, but closer. Moving with purpose. Gathering. And there was something else. Newer. A presence he'd noticed at the assembly but hadn't addressed, a thread of attention directed at the chaos his emergence was creating. Not afraid. Amused. Someone watching the upheaval and finding it useful. Naruto stood still on the sidewalk. A car passed. Its headlights washed over him and he cast no shadow, a quirk that no one noticed because no one was watching. Someone's planning something, he said to the night air. Something stupid. He resumed walking. Whatever it was, it would come to him eventually. Things always did. The ambitious, the desperate, the deluded, they always eventually turned their attention to the oldest power and tried their luck. He almost felt sorry for them. Almost. In a place between places, a pocket dimension warded with magic that predated the current Satan regime, a silver-haired devil with mismatched eyes sat in an ornate chair and watched a recording of the assembly through a scrying mirror. Sirzechs Lucifer, son of the original morning star, eldest living devil, and the most dangerous creature that most people had forgotten existed, watched the Primordial Kitsune make his ruling class bow, and smiled. Not with fear. Not with awe. With delight. Oh, this is perfect, he murmured to the empty room. Absolutely perfect. The chaos of a new power. The distraction of the Satans. The fear of every faction redirected toward a single point. While everyone watched the fox, while everyone scrambled to react, to accommodate, to survive, no one was watching Sirzechs. And he had so much to do. He waved a hand and the scrying mirror shifted, showing a different image now. A sealed vault in a dimension that shouldn't exist. Inside it, something ancient. Something designed for one specific purpose. To kill primordials. Sirzechs' smile widened. Grandfather's last contingency. I always wondered why he built it. Now I know. He leaned back in his chair. Steepled his fingers. Let the fox settle in. Let him make friends. Let him care about things. His eyes, one violet, one gold, glittered in the dark. Things that care about things can be hurt through those things. That's the beautiful paradox of attachment. He chuckled. Welcome back to the world, old fox. I'm going to make your stay very interesting. The mirror went dark. The pocket dimension folded in on itself, hiding its master from every detection method known to the supernatural world. And in Kuoh Town, on his rooftop beneath the stars, Naruto slept lightly and dreamed of nothing, while somewhere in the dark, plans took shape around him like a noose being woven from spider silk. Invisible. Patient. Waiting. Chapter 3, Old Sins, New Blood. 2 weeks settled into something resembling routine. Naruto woke with the sun, not because he needed to, but because he liked the way dawn painted Kuoh Town in shades of amber and rose. He'd claimed a permanent spot on the apartment rooftop, manifesting a futon from energy each night and dissolving it each morning. The building's residents never noticed the extra presence 7 stories above their heads. The pigeons had. 3 pigeons, specifically, had decided he was furniture and began roosting near him each night. He named them. The fat one was Gamabunta. The nervous one was Shikamaru. The aggressive one who pecked the others was Sakura. He ate breakfast at Ichiraku, always miso, always extra chashu, and then wandered. Some days through town. Some days through the surrounding forests. Once, he'd walked to Tokyo on a whim, covering the distance in 3 hours at a pace that shouldn't have been possible for his casual stride but was, because distance was a suggestion to him rather than a rule. Tokyo had been overwhelming. Brilliant. Loud and bright and alive in a way that made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. He'd eaten 7 different foods from 7 different street vendors and decided that takoyaki was mankind's greatest invention. He'd also noticed the surveillance. Not from the devils, they were obvious about it, and he didn't mind. Rias had a rotation of familiars keeping loose track of his movements, which he found more endearing than annoying. It was the other surveillance that drew his attention. Subtle. Professional. Not fallen angel, not devil, not angel. Human. Some human organization was watching him. Or trying to. Their technology was advanced for the era but laughably transparent to his senses. Cameras he spotted 3 blocks before reaching them, tracking devices that pinged like foghorns to his awareness, agents who followed him with the careful tradecraft of professionals who didn't know their target could hear their heartbeats from 200 meters. He let them watch. They'd figure out eventually that their instruments told them nothing useful. On the morning everything changed, Naruto was halfway through his second bowl of ramen when the barrier around Kuoh Town screamed. Not metaphorically. The wards Rias and Sona maintained, layered detection and defense barriers keyed to identify hostile supernatural intrusion, activated simultaneously, a shriek of magical energy that only those with supernatural senses could hear. To the humans on the street, nothing changed. To Naruto, the air turned sharp and electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Multiple intrusions. 8, no, 10. Coming in fast from the south, high altitude, moving with military precision. Fallen angel energy signatures, strong ones. Not scouts. Not strays. An assault team. Naruto set down his chopsticks. Wiped his mouth with a napkin. Left exact change on the counter. Thanks for the meal, he told the owner, who smiled and waved. He stepped out onto the street and looked south. Nothing visible yet, they were still high, still distant, but closing fast. 5 minutes, maybe less, until they were over the town. His phone buzzed. He'd acquired one a week ago. Seraphol had insisted during their tour of Lilith, pressing the device into his hands with a declaration that even primordials need to text. He'd been skeptical until he discovered mobile games. Now he was mildly addicted to something called Puzzle Quest, and had Seraphol's number, Sirzechs' number, and for reasons he didn't fully understand, Rias's number saved in his contacts. The text was from Rias, hostile incursion detected. Fallen angels. Large force. My peerage is mobilizing. Please stay safe. Please stay safe. Addressed to him. The Primordial Kitsune. He smiled at his phone, typed back have fun, and started walking toward the school. Not because he intended to fight. Because the ley line convergence beneath Kuoh Academy was the obvious target for anyone assaulting this territory with serious intent, and he wanted to see who was stupid enough to try. Rias was already at the school grounds when the first fallen appeared in the sky. Her full peerage stood around her, Akino with lightning already crackling between her fingers, Kiba with a blade manifested, Kaneko in her fighting stance, Asia clutching her healing sacred gear, Zenobia with Durandal's weight across her shoulders, and Issei, the Red Dragon Emperor, whose boosted gear pulsed with green light as he stacked power doublings. Sona's peerage had taken the east approach, covering the school's flank, maintaining the barrier against further intrusion. 10 contacts, Sona's voice came through the communication circle. All mid to high tier. 1 substantially stronger, cadre class. This isn't a random incursion, Rias. This is organized. I can see that. Rias's power of destruction burned at her fingertips. Her heart hammered. She'd fought strays. She'd fought in raiding games. But a genuine military assault on her territory with her people in danger, the sky darkened. They descended like black rain, 10 figures in dark armor, wings of pitch spreading wide, halos of corrupted light orbiting their heads. They landed in a semicircle on the school's athletic field with the coordinated precision of soldiers who'd done this 1,000 times. And behind them, above them, one more figure descended slowly. Deliberately. Theatrically. 10 wings of deepest black. Armor that shone like obsidian. A face that was handsome and cruel and old, the face of a being that had fought in the Great War and never stopped wanting to fight it. Kokabil. Well, well. His voice carried across the field with supernatural clarity. The little Gremory princess and her toy soldiers. I expected more from Satan's sister. Rias's jaw set. You're in my territory uninvited, Kokabil. This is an act of war. War. He said the word like a prayer. Like a lover's name. Yes. That's exactly what it is. What it should be. What it's always been, between our kinds. He spread his arms wide. But your generation has forgotten that. Peace treaties. Diplomacy. Coexistence. He spat the word. You've made us weak. All of us, devils, angels, fallen. Weak and soft and forgetting what we are. You're insane, Aquino said flatly. I'm the only sane one left. Kokabil's eyes blazed. The Great War ended without a winner. Without resolution. God died and nobody told us. Billions of prayers directed at a corpse, and the seraphs just, he laughed, wild and sharp, kept pretending. And now? Now something's woken up. Something ancient. And what do the Satans do? They bow to it. His expression twisted. Disgust. Rage. The rage of a warrior who'd been denied his purpose. I won't bow. Not to Sirzechs. Not to Michael. Not to any fox that crawls out of the earth and demands reverence. He pointed at Rias. I'm going to kill you. Satan's sister, on Satan's territory. And when your brother comes for revenge, when Michael retaliates, when the fox intervenes, the war starts again. Finally. Properly. You can't seriously believe, Rias started. Kokabil raised a hand. Snapped his fingers. His 10 soldiers attacked. The battle was immediate and brutal. Rias's peerage was strong, genuinely strong for their age, but Kokabil's soldiers were Great War veterans. They fought with the economy of beings who'd survived millennia of combat, each movement deliberate, each strike aimed to kill rather than to wound. Kiba engaged 2 at once, his sword constructs flickering between forms, holy demonic hybrid blades that bit through fallen angel armor. He was fast, faster than either of his opponents individually, but together they hemmed him in, forced him defensive, exploited the overextension that Naruto had identified weeks ago. Kaneko met one head-on, Rook-enhanced strength against fallen angel might. Her fists cracked armor. Her opponent's light spear scored a line across her cheek. They traded blows like boxers in a ring too small for either, neither gaining ground. Aquino, half fallen herself, lightning and holy lightning weaving together, dueled 2 more in the air. Her power was considerable, her technique refined, but these were soldiers who'd fought her father's generation. They knew fallen angel combat patterns inside and out, including the hybrid style she developed. They adapted. Pressed. Forced her higher. Zenobia charged with Durandal blazing, the holy sword's weight and power overwhelming the fallen she targeted. She was a hurricane of blue destruction, all force and fury. Her opponent fell back. Then the second moved in behind her. "Behind you!" Issei shouted, intercepting the flanking fallen with a boosted gear punch that sent it skidding across the field. But his power was still building, doubling stacking but not yet sufficient for the highest tiers. A light spear caught his shoulder. He grunted. Asia ran to him, twilight healing blazing green. Rias fired destruction orbs with precision, supporting her peerage, covering gaps, targeting the fallen who pressed too hard. She was good. Tactical. But she was one devil against a coordinated assault force, and Kokobile hadn't even entered the fight yet. The cadre-class fallen stood above it all on dark wings, watching with a critic's eye. Evaluating. Waiting. Disappointing, he called down. I expected the Red Dragon Emperor to be further along. And you, he looked at Rias, you really are just a girl playing at war, aren't you? Rias's teeth clenched. A destruction orb the size of a car formed in her hands. She hurled it, not at his soldiers, but at him. Kokobile caught it. Caught it. In one hand. The annihilation energy crackled against his skin, eating at his palm, and he smiled through the pain before crushing it into nothing. Better, he said. But not nearly enough. He moved. Fast, terrifyingly fast for something his size. He crossed the distance between sky and ground in a blink, light spear forming in his hand, aimed directly at Rias. Akino screamed and dropped from her aerial duel, too far, too slow. Kiba abandoned his opponents and sprinted, too far, too slow. Issei's sacred gear screamed boost in a desperate doubling, a hand caught the light spear 6 inches from Rias's chest. Bare. Tanned. Whisker-marked wrist. Naruto held Kokobile's spear the way a man holds a pencil, loosely, easily, between thumb and 2 fingers. The killing strike that would have pierced the Gremorieris stopped dead against a grip that didn't tremble, didn't strain, didn't acknowledge the force behind it in any way. Kokobile's eyes went wide. Hi, Naruto said. He was just there. Standing between Rias and the cadre-class fallen angel with his free hand in his pocket and an expression of mild interest on his face. He hadn't been there a second ago. He hadn't moved to the spot. He'd simply appeared. As if the space between his previous position and this one had politely stepped aside. Kokobile started. Naruto squeezed. The light spear, a construct of holy energy dense enough to crack mountains, shattered. Fragments of light scattered like broken glass and dissolved before hitting the ground. I was watching, Naruto said conversationally. From over there. He tilted his head toward the school building. Figured I'd let the kids handle it. Good training. But then you went for the kill on a girl who wasn't ready for you, and he clicked his tongue. That's just rude. Kokobile's 10 wings flared. He shot backward, 50 meters in an instant, creating distance. His expression had shifted from shock to something more complex. Recognition. Assessment. The calculation of a warrior encountering an unknown. The fox, he said. The primordial. In the flesh. Naruto didn't pursue. Didn't need to. He stood where he was, bare feet on the athletic field's grass, and the air around him changed. Not the full pressure he'd shown in the underworld, not even close. Just enough that every combatant on the field, devil and fallen alike, froze. Kokobile's soldiers stopped fighting. Not by choice. Their bodies simply stopped, locked in place by an ambient pressure that treated their strength as irrelevant. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Naruto said. He wasn't loud. He wasn't dramatic. He spoke the way you speak to a child who's about to touch a hot stove, calm, certain, with the absolute confidence of someone who knows the outcome. You're going to take your soldiers. You're going to leave this town. And you're never going to come back. Kokobeel stared at him from 50 meters away. His jaw was tight. His eyes burned. 10,000 years of rage and frustration and warrior's pride churned behind that gaze. And if I refuse? Naruto tilted his head. Then you die. Right here. Right now. Not in a fight, because this wouldn't be a fight. In an ending. Quick, if you're lucky. I'm not cruel. You think, Kokobeel's voice shook. Not with fear. With rage. You think you can just appear and dictate terms? You, who slept through everything? Who let the war happen? Who let God die without lifting a finger? Yes. Simple. Final. I think exactly that. I am Kokobeel. The fallen angel's power erupted, all 10 wings blazing, holy light corruption pouring off him in waves that scorched the grass and cracked the ground. I fought in the Great War. I killed seraphs. I will not be dismissed by some animal who, Naruto moved. One step. That's all it was. One step forward. The air displaced. Kokobeel, 10-winged cadre class, Great War veteran, killer of seraphs, flew backward as if hit by the hand of God. Not from an attack. From the pressure of Naruto taking a single step with intent. The fallen angel's body ragdolled through the air, crashed through the school's outer wall, through a classroom, through the interior wall, through the next classroom, and finally embedded in the building's central support column with a sound like thunder. Silence. Naruto stood in the grass. He hadn't thrown a punch. Hadn't fired an attack. Hadn't manifested a single tail. He'd taken one step, and the displacement of his intent moving through space had been sufficient. He looked at the hole in the school building. Sighed. I liked that school, he said. The architecture was nice. Behind him, Ria's Gremory stood frozen. Her peerage stood frozen. Sona's peerage, arriving from the east approach, stood frozen. Every being present stared at the casual, total annihilation of what had been, 30 seconds ago, the most dangerous threat any of them had ever faced. A groan from the rubble. Kokobeel was alive, barely. His wings were shattered. His armor was dust. He dragged himself from the wall on arms that trembled and wouldn't support his weight, and blood that shone faintly golden ran from a dozen wounds. Naruto walked toward the school building. Unhurried. His bare feet left no prints in the torn-up grass. Here's the thing about you, Kokobeel. He stepped through the hole in the wall. Into the destroyed classroom. His voice echoed in the dust and debris. You're old enough that you should know better. Old enough to remember what primordials are. Old enough to know that picking a fight with one isn't brave, it's stupid. He stood over the fallen angel. Kokobeel looked up at him through one functioning eye, the other swollen shut, and his expression was, not defeated. Not yet. Something else lived in that gaze. Something that wasn't just rage or pride. Purpose. Go ahead, Kokobeel rasped. His shattered mouth twisted into a bloody smile. Kill me. Naruto paused. Looked at him more carefully. Read the want in that broken face. You want me to kill you, he said. Not a question. Kill me here. On devil soil. A cadre class fallen, murdered by a being allied with the Satans. Azazel will have to respond. Michael will demand answers. The factions will go to war. Because your death becomes a catalyst. Naruto crouched down. I level with the broken angel. That's your plan. That's why you came with 10 soldiers instead of 50. Why you attacked a target you knew was watched by me. You didn't come to win. You came to die productively. Kokobeel's bloody smile widened. Clever, Naruto acknowledged. Genuinely clever. Disgusting, but clever. He straightened. Looked down at the fallen angel with eyes that held no anger. No contempt. Just understanding. And behind the understanding, a decision being made. No. Kokobeel's smile faltered. I'm not going to kill you. Naruto said it simply. I'm not going to give you your war. I'm not going to be your tool, Kokobeel. Not today. Not ever. Then what? Naruto reached down. Placed 2 fingers against Kokobeel's forehead. The touch was gentle, barely contact at all. Kokobeel's eyes went wide. What I'm going to do, Naruto said quietly, is take your wings. Golden light erupted from his fingertips. Not destructive, extractive. It reached into Kokobeel's being, into the fundamental structure of what made him a fallen angel, and pulled. Not his life. Not his power. His nature. Kokobeel screamed. His remaining wings, broken but still present, still part of him, dissolved. Not destroyed. Removed. Pulled away from his essence like threads drawn from a tapestry, leaving behind, nothing. When Naruto lifted his fingers, Kokobeel lay on the broken floor of a ruined classroom, breathing, alive, whole, and utterly, completely, mundane. Not fallen. Not angel. Not supernatural at all. Human. You want war so badly, Naruto said, standing over the thing that had been Kokobeel. Fine. Go fight one. As a mortal. With mortal strength, mortal speed, mortal lifespan. 60, 70 years, maybe less, at your age now. He turned away. See how much you love battle when it can actually kill you. The sound that came from Kokobeel's throat wasn't a scream. Wasn't a word. It was something deeper, the sound of identity breaking. Of 10,000 years of self being stripped away in seconds, leaving behind a hollow where purpose used to be. Naruto walked out of the ruined classroom and back onto the field. Behind him, the thing that used to be Kokobeel curled on its side in the rubble and wept. On the field, Kokobeel's 10 soldiers stood frozen. Not by Naruto's pressure anymore, that had faded. By fear. By having witnessed what had just happened to their commander. Naruto looked at them. 10 fallen angels, all at least 4-winged, all ancient, all veterans. They stared back at him with the wide eyes of prey animals. Your boss is alive, he told them. Human now, but alive. You can take him and leave, or you can stay and share his fate. Your choice. You have 30 seconds. They moved in 20. 2 of them scooped up the weeping mortal that had been Kokobeel, and all 10 activated transportation circles with shaking hands and vanished in flashes of corrupt light. Gone. Just like that. The field was quiet. Torn up, scorched in places, 2 holes in the school building, but quiet. The crisis, start to finish, had lasted less than 5 minutes. Naruto turned to face the assembled peerage members. Ryasa's group. Sona's group. 20-odd young devils staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to terror to, Issei. The Red Dragon Emperor. Who looked at Naruto with an expression that was none of those things. It was, admiration. Pure and unfiltered. The kind a young warrior directs at someone who embodies everything they want to become. That, Issei said, was the most badass thing I have ever seen in my life. Naruto blinked. Then laughed, full, surprised, the tension of the moment cracking like ice in sunlight. Thanks, kid. He grinned. You've got a good punch, by the way. Saw you tag that flanker. Solid form. Issei's face lit up like a sunrise. You saw that? You were watching. The Primordial Kitsune saw me fight. Issei. Rias's voice was strained. She stepped forward. Her hands were trembling, adrenaline and something else. Something that looked like barely contained fury. You were here. The whole time. I was, Naruto confirmed. And you waited. You waited until he was about to. She stopped herself. Took a breath. Her eyes were blazing. He could have killed me. He wasn't going to. His spear was 6 inches from my chest. And I was 6 inches from his spear. Naruto's tone was even. Not dismissive, serious. Respectful. I was never going to let him kill you, Rias. Or anyone here. But I told you before, you need to fight. You need to grow. If I'd stepped in the moment they arrived, what would you have learned? I would have learned that when my people are in danger, their safety matters more than my education. Her voice was sharp. Not intimidated. Not awed. Angry. At him. At a being that had just unmade a cadre-class fallen angel with a touch. Naruto looked at her. Really looked. And smiled. You're right, he said. Rias blinked. The anger stalled. You're right, he repeated. Their safety does matter more. And I, miscalculated. Treated this like a training exercise when it was a genuine threat. He inclined his head, the smallest bow he'd given anyone since waking. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Rias stared at him. The anger dimmed, not gone, but tempered by the genuine surprise of an apology freely given. A being of limitless power, acknowledging a mistake to an 18-year-old devil. She swallowed. Okay. Thank you. Kaneko. Naruto looked at the small rook. You took a hit earlier. Before Kokobile. How are the ribs? Bruised, Kaneko said. Same flat tone as always. But her golden eyes were wider than usual. Asia healed me. Good. He looked at Kiba. You overextended twice. Left your back open to the second opponent. If they'd been faster, I know. The knight's jaw was tight. Shame colored his features. I'm working on it. Don't beat yourself up. Just work on it. Naruto looked around the group. All of you, you fought well. Against opponents centuries older with more experience. You held your ground and nobody died. That's not nothing. He said it simply. Without fanfare. But the words landed like warmth on cold skin, validation from the most powerful being any of them had ever encountered. Several of them stood a little straighter. Now. Naruto's tone shifted. We have a problem. Rias frowned. The school, the damage, not the school. The school's fixable. He turned and looked south, the direction Kokobile's soldiers had fled. Kokobile didn't come up with this plan alone. He's a warrior, not a strategist. Someone pointed him at this town. Someone told him about me. Someone knew that if he attacked here, it would create maximum chaos. Who? Sona asked. She'd been quiet throughout, observing, processing, but now she stepped forward, glasses glinting. That's the question. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Not quite a squint, more like a man studying something at a distance. I've been feeling it since I woke up. Something watching. Not me specifically, the situation. The ripples I'm causing. Someone's riding those ripples. Kokobile mentioned the other factions, Rias said. He wanted to reignite the war. He did. But for someone else's benefit. Naruto looked back at them. Keep your wards tight. Fix the barriers, they were tampered with before the attack. Small holes, deliberate. That's how the Minotaur got through last week too. Someone's been weakening our defenses. Sona's voice was sharp. Offended. This was her responsibility. Subtly. Carefully. Testing response times and capabilities. Naruto shrugged. I don't know who yet. But I will. He started to walk away, toward the school gate, toward the street, toward his ramen stand and his rooftop and the quiet rhythm of the life he was building here. Naruto. Riasa's voice stopped him at the gate. He looked back. She stood in the middle of the torn-up field, her peerage around her, destruction energy still fading from her hands. Young. Fierce. Absolutely unwilling to be dismissed. Thank you, she said. For stopping him. Even if you waited too long to do it. He grinned. Even your gratitude has teeth. I really do like you, Rias Gremory. He left. News of Kokobeel's attack and defeat traveled fast. Within hours, every faction knew. Within a day, the story had been told and retold and distorted and mythologized until it barely resembled what had actually happened. What remained consistent across every version, the Primordial Kitsune had faced a cadre-class fallen angel and ended the encounter without throwing a punch. Had stripped a 10-winged fallen of his nature with a touch. Had done it casually. In heaven, Michael received the report and was silent for a very long time. Then he sent a formal communication to Sirzechs Lucifer. The fallen angel Kokobeel had acted without Grigori authorization. Heaven would not consider his actions representative of any faction. They hoped the Primordial was not displeased. In Grigori headquarters, Azazel read the report 3 times. Then he broke his favorite pen by gripping it too hard. Not from fear, from irritation. Kokobeel had been his problem, a rogue he'd been tracking for decades. And now the idiot had gone and gotten himself depowered by a being Azazel desperately wanted to study, not antagonize. Perfect, he muttered to his empty lab. Absolutely perfect. Now the fox thinks we're all like that madman. Great first impression. He began drafting a letter. Then discarded it. Then drafted another. Then picked up a bottle of whiskey instead. Among the yokai of Kyoto, Yasaka, the 9-tailed fox who governed the supernatural elements of the ancient capital, received the news and went very still. A primordial kitsune. The primordial kitsune. The entity her entire race descended from, however distantly. Awake. Active. In the world. She needed to meet him. Needed to, what? Pay respects. Acknowledge kinship. Simply see him, to confirm with her own senses that the progenitor of foxkind was real and present. She began making arrangements. And in Kuoh Town, in the aftermath, Naruto sat in the park at sunset and thought about what he'd done. Stripping Kokobeel's nature. He hadn't planned that. Hadn't thought about it beforehand. The decision had come in the moment, faced with a being who wanted death, who wanted to be a martyr, who wanted his end to mean something terrible. Naruto had chosen the one punishment worse than death for a creature of pride. Irrelevance. Was it cruel? Maybe. Was it kinder than killing? He thought so. Kokobeel would live. Would age. Would eventually die, as all humans did. And in those mortal years, he'd have the chance to be something other than a weapon looking for a war. Probably wouldn't take it. But the chance was there. His phone buzzed. Sirzechs. I heard, the Devil King's voice said without preamble. Are you alright? I'm fine. Your sister's fine. Everyone's fine. I know, I've spoken with Rias. I meant, are you alright? Naruto paused. That wasn't a question about physical well-being. Sirzechs was asking, I took away 10,000 years of identity in 3 seconds, Naruto said. Yeah. I'm thinking about that. Should you be? Probably. It's good to think about the weight of what you do to people. Keeps you, he searched for the word, grounded. Silence on the line. Then, for what it's worth, I think what you did was more merciful than any alternative. He came to die. You denied him that while still ending the threat. Yeah. Naruto watched the sunset paint the sky in blood and gold. That's what I keep telling myself. Naruto. Sirzechs' voice shifted, from personal concern to political authority. Smooth transition. The man was good at this. Kokobeel's attack is going to accelerate things. The Three Factions Peace Summit, we've been discussing it for years. Now, with your presence as a factor and this incident proving the instability of the current détente, it's going to happen. Soon. Weeks, not months. A peace summit. All three factions. Leaders. Decision makers. We'd like, a careful pause, your presence. As an observer. Not a participant. You want me there so that everyone behaves themselves because they're terrified of me. I was going to phrase it more diplomatically, but yes. Naruto laughed. Sure. I'll come. I've never been to a peace summit. Might be interesting. Thank you. Real relief in Sirzechs' voice. I'll send details when we have them. The call ended. Naruto put his phone away and watched the last of the sunset fade. A peace summit. Three factions that had been at war for millennia, coming together to end it. With him as the silent weight in the room that kept everyone honest. He could live with that role. Later that night, while Kuoh slept and the damaged school sat empty waiting for repairs that devil magic would complete before Monday morning, something moved in the shadows. Not Naruto. Not any of the town's residents. Something that shouldn't have been there, that wasn't detected by any ward or barrier because it moved between the frequencies those defenses monitored. A figure. Hooded. Lean. Moving through the wreckage of the classroom where Kokobeel had fallen with the precise movements of someone searching for something specific. They found it where the blood had pooled. Kokobeel's blood, the golden-tinged blood of a fallen angel before Naruto had changed him. It still held residual power. Still hummed with the echo of what had been done to it. The method Naruto had used, the extraction, the transformation, had left traces in the biological material. The figure collected the blood carefully. Vials. Sealed with magic. Every drop meticulously preserved. Then something else caught their attention. The floor where Naruto had stood. Where his bare feet had rested during the extraction. The stone was different there. Not damaged. Enhanced. As if the mere contact of his physical form had elevated the material's fundamental nature. The rock was denser. Harder. Faintly luminous if you looked with the right senses. The figure took samples of that too. Then they stood. Looked around the destroyed classroom with hooded eyes that gleamed violet and gold. Smiled. He can extract nature, the figure murmured. Soft voice. Male. Amused and calculating in equal measure. Strip it away with a touch. Fascinating. If he can take, can he give? The figure reached into their cloak and produced something. Small. Old. A fragment of something larger, bone-white, covered in sigils so ancient they predated written language. It pulsed with a darkness that wasn't demonic, wasn't fallen, wasn't angelic. Something else. Something from before. Let's find out, Sirzechs Lucifer said to the empty classroom. Let's test the limits of our new friend. He dissolved into the shadows between seconds. No transportation circle. No magic signature. Just, gone. As if he'd never been there. The classroom sat empty and broken. By morning, devil repair crews would arrive and find the damage and nothing else. The blood was gone. The stone samples were gone. And the oldest living devil was several steps closer to something that no living being should possess. Morning again. Naruto's sixth dawn in Kuoh Town since the attack. Routine reasserting itself. Ramen at Ichiraku. Walk through the park. Check on the school repairs, finished now, seamless, as if Kokobile had never come. But something had shifted in how the town related to him. People, supernatural people, greeted him now. Riasa's peerage members, when they crossed his path. Sona's peerage, more formally but still present. A nod here. A wave there. Kaneko, once, materializing beside him on a park bench and offering him a cookie from a bag she was eating without a word. He'd taken it. They'd sat in silence for 20 minutes. It had been nice. Issei found him at the ramen stand 2 days after the attack and sat down with the enthusiastic lack of subtlety that was apparently his default state. "Can I ask you something?" the boy said, ordering without looking at the menu. "You're going to regardless. How did you get so strong? Like, was it training? A special technique? Something you were born with?" Naruto slurped a noodle. Considered the question. Considered the boy, barely 17, housing one of the most powerful sacred gears ever created, burning with the desire to become something more. The Red Dragon Emperor. A title with weight. A destiny with teeth. All three, Naruto said. I was born with potential. I trained beyond what my body thought it could handle. And I found techniques, methods, that pushed past normal limits. He looked at Issei. But the honest answer? Time. I've been alive longer than your mind can process. I've had eons to grow. You're, what? A year into this? Less. About a year. And you're already housing a heavenly dragon and stacking power doublings. That's not nothing, kid. Give yourself some credit. Issei grinned. But could I, is it possible to reach, my level? Naruto shook his head. No. I won't lie to you about that. The gap between us isn't about effort or talent. It's about what we fundamentally are. But that doesn't mean you can't become incredible. You can. You will. The Red Dragon Emperor is a title that's been carried by some genuinely terrifying people throughout history. So how do I get better? Faster? Naruto studied him. The earnestness. The hunger to grow. It reminded him of himself. A long time ago. A boy in orange who wanted to be Hokage and didn't know the meaning of impossible. Your sacred gear doubles your power every 10 seconds, Naruto said. That's your baseline ability. But you're using it linearly. Stacking doublings until you have enough raw force, then swinging with everything you've got. Issei frowned. That's, yeah. Pretty much. It's effective against opponents who let you stack. But what happens when someone's faster than your accumulation rate? When they hit you before you've doubled enough to matter? I get hit. Right. So here's what you need. Naruto held up a finger. Efficiency. Don't waste doublings on raw power alone. Double your speed. Your reaction time. Your durability. The boosted gear amplifies, it doesn't specify what it amplifies. You've been treating it like a hammer. Treat it like a toolkit. Issei's eyes widened. Drake, can I do that? A deep voice rumbled from the green gem on his gauntlet. He's not wrong, partner. I've been telling you this. You have not been telling me this, I implied it. Multiple times. You were busy staring at, anyway. Issei turned back to Naruto, ears red. Thank you. That's, really helpful. Naruto waved a hand. Don't mention it. Just promise me something. What? When you get stronger, and you will, don't use it to be cruel. Power without purpose is just destruction. And destruction is, he paused. Smiled ruefully. Trust me. It gets old. Issei nodded solemnly. Then his face split into a grin. Can I tell people the Primordial Kitsune gave me training advice? I gave you one piece of advice. That's still training advice from the strongest being alive. Naruto shook his head. Tell whoever you want. I don't care about reputation. Issei left with the bouncing energy of a kid who just met his hero. Naruto watched him go and felt something warm settle in his chest. Not quite pride, he hadn't earned that yet. But investment. Interest in what the boy would become. This was dangerous, he knew. Caring about people. About their growth and their futures and their struggles. It created attachment. An attachment created vulnerability, not to physical harm, nothing physical could harm him, but to the emotional weight of loss. He'd lost people before. Many times. Over many millennia. Each loss had been a wound that never fully healed, because immortals accumulate scars the way rivers accumulate sediment, slowly, inexorably, until the weight of them changes your course. But he'd also decided, somewhere in that 4,000-year sleep, in the dreams that weren't dreams, that a life without attachment wasn't a life worth staying awake for. So he'd care. He'd invest. He'd let these young devils and their bright burning futures matter to him. And if someone tried to use that against him, well, they'd learn why primordials were feared even by gods. The message arrived 3 days later. Not by phone. Not by magic circle. Not by any conventional means. Naruto was on his rooftop at midnight, lying on his back, watching the stars that managed to fight through Kuoh's light pollution, when the air beside him folded. Not a transportation circle. Not a dimensional breach. A fold, space creasing like paper, creating a pocket, and inside that pocket, a single piece of paper. It fell onto his chest with the weight of a leaf. He picked it up. Read it. 3 words. Written in a script so old that no living being except him should be able to read it, a language that predated the current world's supernatural framework. The language of primordials. Of the first things. 3 words, I know you. Naruto read them. Read them again. Set the paper on his chest and stared at the sky. Someone knew primordial script. Someone could fold space without a magical signature. Someone was watching him closely enough to deliver a message to his rooftop without detection. Interesting, he murmured. Not afraid. Not alarmed. Just, interested. In the way a predator is interested when it catches an unfamiliar scent. Not a prey scent. Not a threat scent. A curiosity scent. He burned the paper between his fingers. The old script dissolved into golden sparks that faded in the night air. Then he closed his eyes and reached out with his awareness, not his normal passive sense, but an active search. Pushing his consciousness outward in expanding rings, covering kilometers, then hundreds of kilometers, then thousands, touching every supernatural signature on the planet, cataloging, sorting, looking for the one that had touched this paper. Nothing. Whoever had sent it left no trace. No residual energy. No dimensional echo. Clean, impossibly clean. Only a handful of beings in existence could hide from his active search. Ophis could. Great Red could. Trihexa could, in its sealed state. And apparently, one more. Naruto opened his eyes. Smiled at the stars. It wasn't a warm smile. All right, he said to the night. You have my attention. Let's see what you do with it. The night offered no response. The town slept. The wards hummed. And somewhere, in a place between places, something ancient smiled back. The game had begun. And Naruto hadn't lost a game in longer than time had been counted. Chapter 4, The Fox Among Devils. The weeks between Kokobeel's fall and the peace summit passed like water finding its level, quickly in some places, slowly in others, always moving toward equilibrium. Naruto filled them with life. Not grand gestures. Not political maneuvering. Life. The small, daily accumulation of presence and connection that turns a stranger into a neighbor, a visitor into a resident. He learned the ramen stand owner's name, Takashi, and his daughter's name, Ayumi, who worked the afternoon shift and always gave him extra green onions without being asked. He found a bookstore that carried manga and spent an entire afternoon reading something called One Piece, with growing delight at the audacity of its world building. He discovered that the public library had a section on local history and read every book in it over 2 days, cross-referencing what humans thought had happened in this region with what he knew had happened. He also, without quite meaning to, became something of a fixture at Kuoh Academy. It started with Kaneko. The small rook had a habit of appearing near him during her lunch break, never speaking first, never demanding interaction, just existing in his proximity with the quiet comfort of a cat that has chosen its person. She'd eat her snacks. He'd eat whatever he'd brought from Ichiraku's. Silence would pass between them like a shared blanket. One afternoon, she spoke without looking at him. "You're a fox." "I am." "I'm a cat." "I know." More silence. Then, "Cats and foxes aren't supposed to get along." "Says who?" She considered this. Bit into her cookie. "Nobody important, I guess." That was the entire conversation. But after that, she sat closer. Then Issei started finding him after school, full of questions, full of energy, buzzing with the new applications of his boosted gear he was discovering daily. He'd doubled his reaction speed for the first time and caught a punch from Kaneko that would normally have floored him. The boy was ecstatic about it. Naruto listened to his excitement and offered small corrections, the angle of his stance during amplification, the timing of his doublings relative to an opponent's commitment window, the mental framework for choosing what to enhance in real-time combat. "You're telling me I've been doing it wrong this whole time," Issei said one afternoon, sitting on the grass behind the school gymnasium. "Not wrong. Incomplete. You've been using a scalpel as a sledgehammer. Both work, one just works better." Drake's been saying something similar, but he's a dragon and his advice is always, hit harder, fly faster, burn everything. Not super helpful for ground combat. "I heard that, partner." "You were meant to hear it." Naruto laughed. The dragon in the boy's arm was interesting, ancient, proud, carrying grudges from wars that predated the current faction system. He could feel Drake's awareness studying him through the sacred gears connection. Cautious. Respectful. The dragon recognized what Naruto was, even if Issei didn't fully grasp the scale. Then Kiba started appearing. Quiet and respectful, asking about combat philosophy. About fighting opponents who outclassed you. About surviving when the odds were impossible. "You don't fight the opponent," Naruto told him one afternoon, sitting on the school roof with legs dangling over the edge. "You fight the space. Control distance. Control timing. Make them engage on your terms even if they're stronger, because strength means nothing if you can't apply it. But against someone overwhelmingly faster, nobody is overwhelmingly faster in every direction. People commit to movement. Read the commitment. Be where they aren't going." Kiba had nodded. Thoughtful. Gone away to practice. Come back 2 days later moving differently, more fluid, more adaptive, less committed to individual strikes and more committed to positioning. His sparring results against Zenovia improved immediately. The holy sword wielder's raw power advantage meant less when Kiba simply wasn't where her blade arrived. Even Sona sought him out, though she framed it as administrative concern rather than curiosity. "The barrier tampering has stopped since the Kokabile incident," she reported, standing stiffly in the park while Naruto fed pigeons. "No further intrusions. No unusual activity." "Good," Naruto said, tossing crumbs. Gamabunta waddled aggressively toward the largest piece. "I want to know if you think it will resume." "Probably not through the same method. Whoever was probing learned what they needed. They'll adapt." He looked at her. "You've strengthened the wards." "Considerably." Ajuka-sama provided upgraded detection algorithms. "Smart." But check the dimensional boundaries too. Not just spatial barriers, temporal ones. There are ways to fold through a ward without triggering it if you move between seconds rather than between spaces. Sona's eyes sharpened behind her glasses. That's theoretically possible but practically impossible for anyone you'd normally worry about. But normal stopped applying the day I woke up. He met her gaze steadily. If something can hide from me, even briefly, it can walk through your wards like they're not there. Plan accordingly. She'd gone away looking troubled but thinking. Working the problem. Good. And Rias didn't seek him out with questions or agendas. She appeared organically. In the hallway outside the Occult Research Club when he was talking to Issei. At the ramen stand on mornings she happened to be passing. On the school roof during sunsets he was watching, claiming she needed air after paperwork. They talked. About nothing important. About everything that mattered. About the pressure of being a Satan's sister and carrying expectations that predated your birth. About the rating game system, whether it elevated or exploited. About her peerage members, each one a person she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back, trust built one crisis at a time. He told her things in return. Not specifics, not the world he'd come from, not the life he'd lived before becoming what he was. But observations from his millennia here. Civilizations he'd watched rise with ambition and fall with complacency. Patterns he'd noticed in how societies treated their weakest members, patterns that predicted collapse more reliably than any military assessment. You talk about humans like they're your favorite species, she said one evening, sitting beside him on the roof with sunset painting her red hair in shades of fire. They're not my favorite. They're the most interesting. He watched the sky shift. Devils live for millennia. Angels exist in purpose-built perfection. Fallen brood in darkness. But humans, they get 80 years if they're lucky and they fill them to bursting. Every moment has weight for them in a way it can't for immortals. There's something honest about mortality. Is that why you chose human form? Partly. And partly because a 100-meter fox with 9 tails tends to clear the ramen stand. She laughed. Genuine, warm and unguarded in a way she rarely allowed herself to be around others. He liked the sound of it. Liked that she felt safe enough to make it. You're different, she said after the laugh faded. From what I expected. What did you expect? Something colder. More distant. Like Ophis, that kind of ancient disconnection from everything around you. Ophis is disconnected because she doesn't want connection. He paused. Thought about how to say it honestly. I'm old enough that connection is a choice rather than a need. But I keep choosing it. Because the alternative is, very quiet. And I've had enough quiet. She looked at him then, direct, assessing, the way she always looked at him. Not intimidated. Not performing bravery. Just seeing him. A person looking at another person. You don't have to be quiet anymore, she said simply. Naruto smiled. Not his broad grin, not his diplomatic warmth. Something smaller and more real. I'm figuring that out. Seraphal kept her promise from weeks prior. 3 tours of Lilith in 3 weeks, each one peeling back another layer of devil civilization. The manufacturing district where reincarnated devils worked alongside pure-blood craftsmen, resentment simmering beneath professionalism. The underground markets, gray economy, quasi-legal, tolerated because suppressing them would create worse problems. The gardens, vast, magical, grown from seeds that refugees had carried in their pockets fleeing the civil war when they had nothing else. This is the real underworld, Seraphal said on their 3rd tour, walking through a narrow street packed with food stalls and noise. Not the spires. Not the government halls. This. Naruto bought something fried from a vendor, spiced meat wrapped in flatbread. Bit into it. Good. Different from human world food in ways he couldn't articulate but enjoyed. How many? In Lilith? 20 million. Across all territories? Roughly 40 million. From what? From almost nothing. The Great War killed billions of the original population. The Civil War halved what survived. Her usual brightness was absent entirely. This was the real Seraphal, the one who'd rebuilt a species and carried the weight of that on shoulders hidden behind twin tails and magical girl cosplay. Current population is perhaps 3% of pre-war numbers. 3%. Naruto stopped walking. Looked at the crowd flowing around them. Families. Children. Young devils with their whole lives ahead, oblivious to how close their entire species had come to erasure. You built all of this from 3%. The four of us. A few hundred stubborn survivors who refused to give up. And time. She bought her own street food. Sirzechs is the face, the symbol, the strength. Ajuka rebuilt infrastructure. Falbium rebuilt the military from scratch. And I kept everyone else from invading while we were vulnerable. How? Diplomacy when possible. Strategic assassination when not. She said it without flinching. Without performing guilt for his benefit. I killed people who would have destroyed everything we were trying to save. I'd do it again. Naruto looked at her with recalibrated eyes. Under the performance, under even the sharp diplomat he'd already identified, there was cold steel. Purpose that had been forged in genocide's aftermath and tempered in the work of rebuilding from ash. I respect that, he said. Meant it completely. I know you do. That's why I'm telling you. She smiled, thin, real. Most people get the magical girl act. You get this. Lucky me. Lucky you. Her smile widened slightly. Now try the thing 3 stalls down. It's a dessert made with hellfruit. You'll hate it. Everyone hates it the first time. Then you can't stop eating it. She was right. He hated it. Then he bought 3 more. Ajuka's laboratory existed in its own pocket dimension, a space where physics bowed to the will of its creator and experimentation could proceed without endangering the rest of reality. Crystal matrices grew from nothing, serving as computational arrays. Equations floated in the air like luminous artwork, some complete, some abandoned mid-thought. Workbenches overflowed with prototypes and half-formed concepts. I've rebuilt my mathematical framework 4 times since we spoke at the assembly, Ajuka said, leading Naruto through the crystalline forest of his laboratory. His hands moved as he talked, gesturing at floating equations, pulling up models, dismissing failed approaches with flicks of his fingers. Each iteration gets closer. But there's always a gap, a point where my axioms fail to account for what you are. Naruto touched one of the crystal matrices in passing. It hummed under his fingers, responsive, almost eager. Like a student recognizing its teacher. Show me where it breaks. Ajuka pulled up his latest model, a 3-dimensional representation of supernatural energy flows, suspended in the air between them. Beautiful work. Intricate. Layers of interaction mapped in colored light, demonic power in red, holy in gold, natural in green, all flowing through channels and converging at nodes. Here. Ajuka pointed at the model's center, a point where all flows converged. My mathematics can describe any energy interaction within the existing framework. Devil versus angel. Sacred gear amplification. Dragon power integration. Even the dimensional architecture of the underworld. But when I try to model you, when I insert your parameters, the model distorted. The center point expanded, consuming the surrounding structure, until the entire elegant framework collapsed into a single undifferentiated mass. It collapses, Naruto said. It collapses. Because my model assumes energy exists within a system. A bounded framework with rules and limits. You're not within the system. You're, Ajuka's jaw tightened with frustrated precision, the substrate the system is built on. I can't model you using tools built from you any more than a painting can contain the canvas it's painted on. So you need new tools. I need new axioms. New foundational assumptions. But I don't know what those assumptions should be, because I've never encountered anything that exists outside the framework before. Naruto studied the collapsed model. Turned it over with a gesture, it rotated in the air, and he examined its failure points with the attention of someone who understood what he was looking at. You're close, he said. Closer than you think. Your mistake is here, he pointed at a specific junction in the model's architecture. You're treating the system boundary as absolute. As if inside the framework and outside it are binary states. Ajuka frowned. They are. Something is either within the system or it's a gradient. Naruto held up his hand. Golden energy gathered at his fingertips, not demonic, not holy, not natural. Something that predated those categories. Something that contained them the way white light contains all colors. I'm not outside the system. I'm the system's foundation. There's no boundary between me and what I support, there's a gradient. A smooth transition from substrate to structure. Your mathematics break because you're looking for a wall where there's actually a slope. Ajuka went completely still. His eyes unfocused, the look of a mind processing a paradigm shift in real time. Then his hands began moving. Fast. Pulling up new equations, reshaping them, inserting the concept of gradient boundaries where absolute ones had been. A slope, he whispered. Not binary, continuous. The system doesn't sit on top of its foundation, it emerges from it. The boundary is, there is no boundary. It's a spectrum of, oh. His crystal matrices lit up simultaneously. New calculations cascading through them like dominoes falling in sequence. The collapsed model in the air between them began to reform, not as it had been before, but as something new. A model where the center wasn't a point of collapse but a gradient origin. Where Naruto's parameters didn't destroy the framework but extended it downward into previously unmapped territory. This works, Ajuka breathed. This, I need a month. Maybe 2. But this works. Naruto stepped back. Watched the green-haired Satan lose himself entirely in the mathematics, hands flying, equations birthing equations, crystal matrices singing with computational effort. The man had already forgotten Naruto was there. He let himself out quietly. The Kuoh Academy rooftop had become Naruto's preferred spot for thinking. Not sleeping, he'd found an actual apartment by now, rented with money he'd generated from raw energy conversion, technically counterfeiting, but the bills were molecularly perfect and he chose not to feel guilty about it. But for thinking, for letting his mind work on problems while his eyes watched the sky, the rooftop was better. Tonight's problem, rise of him. He hadn't spoken the name aloud to anyone. Hadn't shared what he'd sensed, the amused, calculating attention that had appeared during the Kokobile incident and lingered like perfume in an empty room. But he'd been working the problem. Passively. Letting his awareness track patterns in the supernatural world's information flow. And patterns had emerged. Small things. A message here, redirected. A shipment there, intercepted. Movements in the gray spaces between faction territories, not military, not political. Archaeological. Someone was excavating. Searching old sites. Places that held significance not to the current supernatural factions but to what had come before them. Pre-war sites. Pre-god sites. Someone was looking for something old. Naruto had a fairly good idea what. There were weapons from his era. Not many, most had been unmade when their purposes ended, but some had been hidden rather than destroyed. Sealed away by primordials who thought they might need them again, or who simply couldn't destroy them. Weapons designed to kill things that couldn't normally be killed. Things like him. He wasn't afraid of them. A weapon designed to kill a primordial was dangerous the way a sword is dangerous to a sleeping man, effective only if the target doesn't see it coming, doesn't know it exists, doesn't have the power to simply reject its function. But in the wrong hands, aimed at the right moment, with the right setup, Naruto exhaled. Watched his breath frost in the cool night air. He needed to make a decision. Act now, find rise of him, end whatever scheme was forming in its cradle. Or wait. Watch. Let the plan develop until he could see its full shape and dismantle it completely rather than pruning a branch that would simply regrow. Patience, he told himself. The summit was coming. Events were converging. And rise of him, if it was rise of him, would eventually have to move. To act in a way that brought him into the open. When that happened, Naruto would be there. But in the meantime, insurance. He reached into himself. Into the deep parts, the substrate, as Ajuka would now call it. The level of his being that existed beneath conscious thought, beneath form, beneath even the concept of self. There, in the absolute foundation of what he was, he set a marker. A tripwire woven into the dimensional fabric of reality itself. If anyone activated a primordial tier weapon anywhere on this planet, in any dimension connected to it, he would know. Instantly. Regardless of distance or concealment. It cost him nothing. The equivalent of setting an alarm clock. But it would ensure that no weapon could be aimed at him, or at anyone he'd chosen to protect, without his immediate awareness. There, he thought. That's handled. Now he could focus on tomorrow. On the summit. On what he hoped would be the beginning of something good for these young factions and their weary cycle of violence. And if it wasn't, if tomorrow went wrong, well. He'd handled wrong before. The peace summit was scheduled for a Tuesday. The morning of, Naruto woke to a message from Sirzechs, neutral pocket dimension. Joint creation by Ajuka and Michael's representative. Graphia will collect you at noon. Thank you for agreeing to attend. He messaged back, bringing snacks. Sirzechs, I'll have refreshments arranged. Naruto grinned at his phone. Then put it away, ate his breakfast at Ichiraku's. Takashi commented that he looked more dressed up than usual, which was inaccurate since he was wearing exactly what he always wore, and spent the morning in the park, thinking. A peace summit. 3 factions that had been killing each other for millennia, sitting down to say, enough. With him as the weight in the room that kept everyone honest. He'd seen peace negotiations before. Many times. Across many civilizations. They succeeded when the pain of continued fighting exceeded the fear of vulnerability. They failed when ego and accumulated grievance outweighed pragmatism. These factions were ready. He could feel it, the exhaustion beneath their posturing, the desire for stability that ran deeper than their pride. The Great War had traumatized all 3 sides in ways that were still bleeding, generations later. They wanted peace. They just needed permission. A reason to stop posturing. A presence that made posturing pointless. He could be that. Happily. Graphia arrived at noon precisely. Transportation circle. Silver and red light. She looked at him, barefoot, Haori, whisker marks, and said nothing about his attire. She'd learned. Ready? She asked. Let's go make history. The pocket dimension was elegant in its neutrality. White marble floors and columns. A domed ceiling that showed no sky, just soft, ambient light from no discernible source. A round table, large enough for 30, with seating arranged in 3 equal arcs. Devil Arc, Sirzechs at the center, flanked by Seraphol and Ajuka. Falbium slightly behind, present but not lead. Graphia at Sirzechs' shoulder. And at the far end of their arc, Rias Gremory and Sona Citri. The next generation, present and accounted for. A political statement about continuity. Angel Arc, Michael at the center. Beautiful in the way all seraphs were beautiful, golden, luminous, perfect. His presence filled his section of the room with warmth that wasn't quite physical. Flanking him, Gabriel, whose beauty was a weapon in its own right, and Uriel, stern-faced and watchful. Several lower-ranked angels filled the remaining seats. Fallen Angel Arc, Azazel at the center. Naruto studied him with interest, the leader of the Grigori, the fallen who'd chosen curiosity over redemption. Dark hair shot with gold, casual clothes that seemed deliberately chosen to contrast with Michael's divine radiance. A grin that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Beside him, Shemhazai, his vice-governor. And, notably, no large escort. A statement of its own: we come in peace, and we prove it by being vulnerable. Naruto had no arc. No seat at the table. His chair was set apart, behind and between the three factions. Observer's position. He'd insisted on it. He wasn't a party to these negotiations. He was atmosphere. Context. The unspoken reason everyone would behave themselves. He settled into his chair, crossed one bare foot over his knee, and watched the room with the easy attention of a spectator at a play. Sirzechs opened. We're here because the alternative has become untenable. The Great War ended without resolution. The aftermath has been centuries of cold conflict, proxy wars, and mutual surveillance. I propose, we all propose, that it ends. Today. Michael inclined his head. Heaven concurs. The system left behind by God functions imperfectly without active conflict to justify its framework. Peace would allow restructuring that benefits all. Azazel leaned back in his chair. Grigori's been ready for decades. I've been saying this for centuries: the war's over, has been over, and pretending otherwise is just old men too proud to admit they stopped fighting. Easy words from the faction that's been stockpiling sacred gear research for those same centuries, Sarah Fall noted, her diplomatic mode fully engaged. Sweet smile. Ice underneath. Easy words from the faction that's been mass-producing reincarnated devil soldiers through the evil peace system, Azazel shot back, still grinning. Both points are valid, Sirzechs said smoothly. Both can be addressed in the terms. That's why we're here, to address them. Naruto watched. Listened. The dance of diplomacy, offer and counteroffer, concession and demand, the careful construction of a document that three fundamentally opposed philosophies could all sign without feeling they'd lost. It went well. Better than he'd expected. These leaders were tired, genuinely tired of the status quo. Michael spoke with the quiet authority of someone who'd been carrying heaven alone since God's death and desperately needed the cognitive load reduced. Azazel displayed the pragmatic directness of a scientist who found politics boring and wanted to get back to his laboratory. Sirzechs mediated with the skill of someone who'd been preparing for this conversation for a century. 2 hours passed. 3. Agreement formed on non-aggression pacts, territorial acknowledgements, communication channels, dispute resolution mechanisms. The framework of peace built itself piece by piece, and Naruto felt pride. Not his, he'd done nothing. Theirs. These young factions, finding their way to coexistence without his intervention. Choosing it themselves. He was smiling when the air cracked. Not metaphorically. The dimensional fabric of the pocket space, carefully constructed, jointly maintained, supposedly impenetrable, cracked. A sound like reality screaming. Every being at the table went rigid. Barriers erupted, devil, angel, fallen, protective magic layering in response to, the crack widened. Something pushed through, not a person. Not yet. A pressure. Familiar. But not his. Different familiar. The pocket dimension's walls shuddered. The marble floor splintered in radiating lines from the point of intrusion. Every alarm, every ward, every protective measure activated simultaneously and then, went silent. Not destroyed. Not overwhelmed. Dismissed. As if something had simply told them no, and they'd obeyed. Through the crack stepped a man. Silver hair. Mismatched eyes, one violet, one gold. A face that held the aristocratic bone structure of old blood devil kind but twisted with an expression of such profound amusement that it bordered on madness. He wore a dark coat over clothes that might have been expensive once but were now worn with the carelessness of someone who considered material possessions beneath his attention. He brought something with him. In his hands. A staff, bone white, covered in sigils that made Naruto's eyes narrow. Sigils he recognized. Sigils in his language. The language of primordials. Rise of him Levon Lucifer, Sirzechs said. His voice was controlled. His power of destruction was not, it boiled around him, barely contained, and his face showed the strain of not unleashing it in a space full of allies. You are interrupting, a peace summit. I know. Rise of him's voice was bright. Cheerful. The enthusiasm of a child crashing an adult party. I heard about it. Thought, why not? Everyone who matters is here. Perfect audience. He stepped further into the room. No one moved to stop him. Not because they couldn't, because the staff in his hand was radiating something that made every supernatural being present feel deeply, fundamentally wrong. It pressed against their existence the way Naruto's presence did. But where Naruto's weight was neutral, ambient, natural, this was hostile. Designed. Targeted. Rise of him's mismatched eyes found Naruto. Locked on. His smile widened. There you are. The guest of honor. The reason for all of this, he gestured expansively at the summit, sudden cooperation. Fear makes such efficient diplomats, doesn't it? Naruto hadn't moved from his chair. His posture was the same, one leg crossed over the other, hands relaxed on the armrests. His expression showed nothing but mild interest. You're the one who sent the message, he said. Calm. Conversational. Guilty. Rise of him twirled the staff like a baton. The sigils flared. Several of the lower-ranked angels and devils physically staggered. I wanted your attention. Sending mail seemed more polite than, oh, I don't know, he raised the staff, doing this. He slammed the staff's base against the marble floor. The effect was instantaneous and terrible. A wave of negation exploded outward, not energy, not power, something else. Something that didn't attack the people in the room but attacked their natures. Their fundamental identities as supernatural beings. Angels felt their grace shudder. Devils felt their demonic power stutter. Fallen felt their wings go numb. It lasted 1 second. Maybe less. Then Naruto was standing. He hadn't stood up. Hadn't risen from the chair. He was simply standing, between Rise of him and everyone else, having crossed 20 meters of space in the gap between one heartbeat and the next. His amber eyes were locked on the staff, and for the first time since he'd woken, his expression held no warmth at all. Put that down, Naruto said. His voice was quiet. Level. Completely devoid of the casual warmth that had characterized every interaction since his awakening. This was something else speaking, not the friendly tourist, not the ramen lover, not the mentor to young devils. Something older. Something that recognized the weapon in Rise of him's hands and was not amused by its presence. Rise of him's smile flickered. Just for a moment. A crack in the performance. Because the weight of Naruto's attention, focused, direct, uncompressed, hit him like a physical force. His feet slid backward 3 inches on the marble despite his best effort to stand firm. Then the smile returned. Wider. More manic. Oh, you recognize it, Rise of him said. Wonderful. Then you know what it does. I know what it was designed to do. I also know it's incomplete. Naruto's eyes moved over the staff, reading the sigils, understanding their pattern. You found a fragment. One piece of something that was meant to be whole. And you activated it anyway, because you're impatient and arrogant and you thought a piece would be enough. Rise of him's smile went fixed. A piece is enough to disrupt. To prove a point. To show everyone in this room that the great Primordial Kitsune is not untouchable. Is that what you're trying to prove? Naruto tilted his head. Then prove it. Behind him, behind the barrier of his presence, the faction leaders were frozen. Not by power. By shock. By the whiplash of going from peaceful negotiation to existential confrontation in seconds. Sirzechs was on his feet, power of destruction raging around him. Michael's wings were manifested, 12 of them, blazing gold. Azazel had something in his hand, a device, a sacred gear prototype, something he'd clearly brought just in case. None of them moved. None of them interfered. Because this was, clearly, obviously, fundamentally, not their fight. Ryzavim raised the staff. The sigils blazed. The bone-white surface screamed with activating energy, primordial energy, the kind that predated the current system, the kind that could theoretically, in sufficient concentration, with the full weapon intact and properly wielded, hurt something like Naruto. A beam of absolute negation fired from the staff's tip. Not toward Naruto's body. Toward his essence. Toward the fundamental substrate of his being, the thing Ajuka had only just begun to map, the gradient between him and the reality he supported. It hit him. Naruto didn't dodge. Didn't block. Didn't deflect. He let it hit him. The beam struck his chest and, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Ryzavim's face went blank. The beam continued, pouring negation energy into Naruto at a rate that should have destabilized a continent, and Naruto stood there. Absorbing it. Not with effort. Not with resistance. With the same casual indifference with which an ocean absorbs a thrown pebble. Is that it? Naruto asked. The beam intensified. Ryzavim's expression twisted, from confidence to confusion to the first edge of something he clearly hadn't felt in a very long time, fear. He poured everything the staff had into the beam. The pocket dimension shook. Cracks spiderwebbed across the marble. The air itself distorted. Naruto walked forward. Into the beam. Through it. Each step bringing him closer to Ryzavim while the full force of a primordial killing weapon poured into him without effect. His Haori rippled in the discharge. His hair moved in unfelt wind. His amber eyes never left Ryzavim's face. I told you, he said, still walking, it's incomplete. The full weapon, assembled, properly wielded, at full power, might have given me a headache. A fragment, assembled by someone who doesn't understand what they're holding. He was 5 meters from Ryzavim now. 4. 3. It's a flashlight aimed at the sun. 2 meters. 1. Naruto reached out and took the staff from Ryzavim's hands. Not violently. Not with force. He simply wrapped his fingers around it and pulled, and Ryzavim's grip, the grip of one of the strongest devils ever born, enhanced by desperation and terror, meant nothing. The staff left his hands as easily as a child losing a balloon to the wind. Naruto held it up. Examined it. The sigils along its surface, the language of his kind, the oldest writing in existence, dimmed in his presence. Went dark. Went dormant. As if the weapon recognized its maker's kin and submitted. Where did you find this? Naruto asked. Conversational again. Almost pleasant. Except that his eyes hadn't regained their warmth, and the pressure in the room hadn't lessened by a single degree. Ryzavim stood before him. Empty-handed. His smile was gone entirely. In its place, for the first time in his immortal life, naked, unfiltered terror. He'd staked everything on this moment. Built his plan around this weapon. Spent months tracking it, excavating it, learning to activate it. His contingency. His proof that primordials weren't invincible. And it had failed. Completely. Utterly. The way a paper shield fails against a volcano. Ryzavim started. His voice cracked. I asked you a question. Naruto's tone hardened. Not shouting. Something worse than shouting, quiet command. The voice of something that expected obedience the way gravity expects objects to fall. Where did you find this? A vault, Rizavim whispered. His bravado, the cheerful madman act, the centuries of untouchable arrogance, had evaporated like dew on hot stone. In a dimension, a sealed dimension, pre-war. Grandfather's notes led me to it. He found it millennia ago but never had cause to use it. Grandfather. Naruto's lip curled. The original Lucifer. Yes. The original Lucifer found a piece of a weapon designed by beings older than him, stored it, and his grandson thought he could use it against the very thing it was designed for. Naruto shook his head. Slowly. With a disappointment more cutting than anger. The arrogance of young races. You find a tool you don't understand and assume competence follows possession. He turned his attention to the staff. Held it in both hands. And pressed. The staff, bone-white, ancient, covered in dead sigils, cracked. Then shattered. Then dissolved into particles of light that Naruto inhaled. Drew back into himself. The fragment of primordial energy returning to the primordial it had been separated from, reabsorbed, reintegrated, made whole with its source. Gone. As if it had never existed. Naruto exhaled. The particles sparkled in his breath for a moment, then faded. He looked at Rizavim. The son of Lucifer stood frozen. A being who had terrorized the supernatural world from the shadows for millennia, who had built the Chaos Brigade, who had schemed and murdered and manipulated with impunity, stood before the Primordial Kitsune like a child caught breaking a window. Now, Naruto said. We need to talk about what happens next. You can't. Rizavim's composure attempted a resurrection. A shadow of his smile flickered. You won't kill me. You didn't kill Kokobile. Your philosophy, you don't. Naruto took one step closer. Rizavim's attempted smile died instantly. Kokobile was a soldier who wanted to die for a cause, Naruto said softly. Misguided. Dangerous. But honest in his way. He believed in something, even if what he believed was wrong. His eyes bored into Rizavim's. You don't believe in anything. You're not fighting for a cause or a people or an ideal. You're bored. You're a spoiled child of ultimate privilege who destroys things because creation bores you. That's exactly what you are. I've seen your kind before. In every era. In every civilization. The ones born with everything who resent the world for not amusing them enough. Who tear things down not because they want something better but because they want entertainment. His voice dropped further. Barely audible now. But every being in the room heard it clearly, as if the words bypassed ears entirely and arrived directly in consciousness. You organized the Kokobile attack. You tampered with Kuoh's barriers. You tested my responses. And you acquired that weapon to prove that I could be challenged, not because you wanted me dead, but because you wanted to watch the chaos of everyone learning I could be hurt. Rizavim said nothing. His silence was confirmation enough. Here is what happens now. Naruto raised his hand. 2 fingers extended, the same gesture he'd used on Kokobile. Rizavim flinched so violently he nearly fell backward. But Naruto didn't touch him. Instead, his fingers rode in the air between them. Golden light trailing from his fingertips, inscribing symbols in the space before Rizavim's chest. Primordial script, the same language that had been on the staff, on the message. But different. These weren't weapon sigils. They were binding sigils. What are you? Rizavim started, genuine panic in his voice now. I'm writing your limits, Naruto said, still inscribing. Your power stays. Your nature stays. Your lifespan, your identity, all of it remains. But these The sigils completed their formation and hung in the air, glowing gold. These are your boundaries. He pressed forward. The sigils sank into Ryzavim's chest, through his clothes, through his skin, into his being. The son of Lucifer gasped. Staggered. Clutched at his chest. You cannot harm the innocent. Directly or through proxies or through schemes. Cannot, not will not choose not. Cannot. Your body will refuse. Your magic will fail. Your mind will blank the intention before it forms. Ryzavim's eyes were wild. You can't, this is, my will, is exactly what it was. You can think whatever you want. Believe whatever you want. Scheme, plan, rage in private until the end of time. Naruto's voice was implacable. But you will never again be able to translate that rage into harm. The bridge between your intent and your action is now mine. And I have closed it. The golden light faded. Ryzavim stood, breathing hard, hands pressed against his chest where the sigils had entered. His eyes were broken. Not physically. Not mentally. But spiritually. The look of a being who has just been leashed. Who has felt absolute freedom become bounded. Who has gone from predator to, not prey. Not powerless. Just, contained. This is worse than death, Ryzavim whispered. Yes, Naruto agreed. It is. Death would be a release. This is consequence. He turned away from Ryzavim. Turned back to face the faction leaders, all standing now, all staring, all wearing expressions that ranged from shock to awe to something very close to relief. Sorry about the interruption, Naruto said. His voice was warm again. Casual. The shift so jarring it was almost comedic, from the voice of absolute judgment to this in the space between sentences. You were making really good progress. Maybe take a 5-minute break and then pick up where you left off. Silence. Then Azazel laughed. Loud, genuine, disbelieving. A 5-minute break. The fallen angel leader gestured wildly at Ryzavim's frozen form, and he wants us to take a 5-minute break. I could use some water, Falbium said from his seat. He hadn't stood up during the entire confrontation. Anyone else want water? The tension broke like a dam. Movement. Voices. People processing, reacting, breathing again. Michael murmured something to Gabriel. Sirzechs moved toward Naruto with purpose. Seraphol was already on a communication circle, issuing rapid orders, securing Ryzavim, alerting security forces, locking down information. Sirzechs reached Naruto. His face was complicated. Relief and gratitude and something else. Something that looked like it might be the beginning of genuine friendship rather than political alliance. You knew, Sirzechs said quietly. About Ryzavim. Before today. I suspected. I confirmed 3 days ago when I traced the weapon's energy signature to his dimensional pocket. Naruto met his eyes. I didn't tell you because I needed him to act. To commit. To bring the weapon here, in front of witnesses from all 3 factions, and prove his guilt beyond political deniability. You used the summit as bait. I used the summit as a stage. The peace talks are real, they needed to happen regardless. But Ryzavim would never resist crashing them. His ego wouldn't allow a historic moment to pass without his fingerprints on it. Sirzechs absorbed this. Then, slowly, you're more politically sophisticated than you pretend to be. I'm extremely old, Sirzechs. I've had practice. Naruto's grin returned, warm, easy, genuine. Now go finish your peace treaty. All 3 of you are ready. The hard part was always starting. You've started. He clapped the Devil King on the shoulder, that same casual gesture, one person to another, and walked back to his observer's chair. Sat down. Crossed his leg over his knee. Everyone stared at him. What? He said. Go on. You were discussing territorial boundaries in the human world. I thought Azazel's proposal about shared monitoring was interesting. Michael was the first to recover. The Seraph's composure was, apparently, resilient even to primordial-level disruption. He smoothed his robes, resumed his seat, and said with perfect calm, indeed. The shared monitoring proposal has merit, though the implementation details require clarification. One by one, the others followed. Resuming seats. Resuming voices. Resuming the work of building peace from the ruins of millennia of war. In the corner, restrained by binding sigils that even he couldn't break, Sirzechs Lucifer sat motionless and stared at nothing. The most dangerous schemer in the supernatural world, rendered permanently harmless by 3 sentences worth of primordial script and the will of something he never should have provoked. The summit continued. And Naruto sat in his chair, watching 3 factions build a future together, and felt, for the first time since waking, like he'd done something worth being awake for. The treaty was signed at sunset, or what passed for sunset in a pocket dimension without a sun. An arbitrary marker chosen because the symbolism appealed to Michael, an ending that was also a beginning. 3 signatures. 3 seals. 3 faction leaders binding themselves and their people to a framework of coexistence that had been dreamed of for centuries and achieved in a single afternoon. Naruto didn't sign. Wasn't asked to. But every being present understood that his existence, his presence in the world, was the invisible 4th signature. The guarantee that the treaty's terms wouldn't be violated without consequence. He was fine with that. Guardians didn't need their names on the document. Afterwards, in the liminal space between the summit's end and everyone's departure, Azazel found him. The fallen angel leader approached with the deliberate casualness of someone who was very much not casual about this conversation. He carried 2 glasses of something amber, whiskey, probably, and offered one to Naruto without asking if he drank. Naruto took it. Sipped. Good whiskey. Old. So, Azazel said. The Primordial Kitsune. So. The Governor-General of Grigori. I wanted to apologize. For Kokobile. He was mine, my responsibility. My failure to contain. Accepted. Naruto sipped again. He was a soldier without a war. That's a dangerous thing to be. You should have given him a purpose before he found his own. You're not wrong. Azazel leaned against a column. His posture was relaxed but his eyes were sharp, analyzing, categorizing, filing away every detail. Can I ask you something directly? Everyone does. The binding you put on Sirzechs. Is it breakable? By me. By nobody else. Not even if he finds another primordial weapon. There aren't any more pieces to find. The one he had was the last fragment on this planet. I'd have felt others. Naruto swirled his whiskey. But to answer your underlying question, no. Nothing he can acquire, build, or steal will undo what I wrote into him. The binding is part of his nature now. It would be easier to change him from a devil into a human than to remove it. Azazel was quiet for a moment. Processing. Then, good. That's, genuinely good. He drank. You know I study sacred gears. I know. I've spent centuries trying to understand how God's system interacts with the fundamental forces of reality. How the gears work, not just what they do, but why they do it. What mechanic allows a human soul to manifest a divine weapon? You want to ask me about it. I want to collaborate about it. Azazel's eyes were bright, the same hungry intelligence he'd seen in Ajuka, but pointed differently. Less mathematical. More intuitive. You're the substrate everything's built on. You understand the foundation. And I've been studying the structures built on that foundation for millennia. Between us, you think we could figure out something new. I think we could figure out something true. Azazel's grin was infectious, the excitement of discovery, pure and childlike beneath centuries of cynicism. Something that explains not just how things work but why they exist at all. Naruto looked at him. The fallen angel. The scientist. The man who'd abandoned heaven because curiosity mattered more than obedience. Who'd spent his exile not brooding but building. Learning. Growing. Come to Kuoh sometime, Naruto said. I'll buy you ramen and we'll talk about the architecture of reality. Azazel's grin widened. Deal. Graphia transported him home. Kuoh Town at night, quiet and mundane, ordinary humans living ordinary lives beneath a sky they couldn't see was full of beings who'd just changed the course of supernatural history. Naruto stood on his apartment's rooftop. Gamabunta was already on his futon, the pigeon had claimed it in his absence and showed no intention of moving. Naruto let him stay. He looked up at the stars, more visible tonight, somehow, as if even the light pollution was respecting the significance of the day, and breathed. Done. Rizavim was contained. The summit was successful. Peace, fragile but real, existed between three factions for the first time in recorded history. And he was tired. Not physically, he didn't experience physical exhaustion. But there was a weariness that came from engaging. From caring. From making choices that affected millions of lives and accepting the responsibility of those choices. He'd bound Rizavim rather than killing him. Stripped his ability to harm while leaving everything else intact. Was that merciful or cruel? He still wasn't sure. Might never be sure. The question would sit in him like a stone in a river, smooth-edged eventually, but always present. His phone buzzed. Rias, I watched you face down Rizavim and I have questions. Many questions. Ramen tomorrow? Naruto smiled at his phone. Tomorrow, he typed back. Your treat. Rias, you literally create money from nothing. Naruto, your treat though. Rias, fine. 7 a.m., don't be late. He put the phone away. Lay back on the futon, displacing Gamabunta who cooed indignantly and waddled to the corner. Stars above. Night air cool. The town humming its quiet human hum below. Tomorrow there would be questions. Political fallout. Recalibration across every faction. A new world being born in the aftermath of what happened today. But tonight, just this. The quiet. The stars. The knowledge that he'd done something right. He closed his eyes. And didn't dream of nothing, for once. He dreamed of a red-haired girl who looked at him like he was just a person. Of a white-haired Satan who saw through his own loneliness. Of a genius who wanted to understand him. Of a lazy king who made him laugh. Of a silver-haired queen who brought him breakfast. Of a world worth staying awake for.